this meeting to order. This is the Wednesday, June 12th, 2024 HDRB meeting. And we have a fairly small packet, some interesting projects. And what we'll do is staff is here. We have at least one or two referred people from the audience with projects.
We don't have any screens.
Yeah, we don't have a,
We do, they're just not functioning.
oh, there it goes. Thank you.
Like we got Maria and Jeremy online as well.
Mine's still not.
Isabel, minutes. Yeah, we're gonna start off with the minutes first. Do I have a motion on the minutes from the last meeting?
Might be something to share your screen. Seem to be.
I didn't see anything wrong with them, so I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion on minutes? None. We'll vote on that. Start down here.
Aye.
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 Okay, we close the minutes out. We'll go ahead and go to the agenda. We'll have staff introduce the first project, which is 101 Scott Street, and this will be the second time we've seen this project.
Jeremy, would you just go to the, I guess, the overall image of it, just so everybody gets that. Okay, this was approved for, there we go, conceptual approval at the May 8th meeting. And there were 10 conditions, and the applicant has responded with those conditions. I think with the presentation, and I don't know, would you prefer to put, I'll let them kind of address how in their presentation, and they have how they're addressing each one of those comments, each one of those 10 comments. In the meantime, we did have a lot of questions about height, and sent you some emails, but probably should have done a little more thorough analysis in the packet, and I apologize for that. But the central question being is how do we measure height in the code? The questions last time were really bringing that middle portion, which is 3 stories, or there was some sensitivity to that. So looking at 2.6.1, a building height is measured by stories. So this is zone T5DC, which is like a downtown district that allows 3 stories and then allows a 4th story if you basically step that 4th story back 15 feet from the road or property line. So that is found in section specific to G. So T.2.6.1 G, the maximum height of a property line shall be 3 stories, the maximum height 15 feet behind the property line or front line of the building shall be 4 stories. A story is listed in 2.6.1A as a habitable level in a building of no more than 15 feet in height from finished floor to finished ceiling. So again, that's 15 habitable feet from finished floor to finished ceiling. There's some other stuff in here, but also I should mention that in 2.6.2, I'm getting a lot of reverb, sorry about that, I'm trying to speak away from it. Commercial buildings have an exempt, well, I guess I should just state that essentially the finished floor of any structure, essentially the height is counted at that, where that's going to be, where that, let me find that section. Let's see, okay. I don't speak.
Kurt, that's the
incorrectly
second,
here.
Kurt, that's the second part of 2.6.1B.
Okay, thank you. There it is.
This is from the
This is from the
International Builder
code.
Code or the city code?
This is from the city code. So, you know, essentially you're counting it from where the flood, you know, where it's being flood proofed. That's where the height starts. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So theoretically, it could be a 4-story building if it was 15 feet back. That you know, each floor could be 15 feet. So does that make sense? And what was sent to you were the exemptions in the code. So 2.6.2 B gives an exception if you flood-proof the building per the standard. You do not have to be elevated above grade. So basically you can, you don't have to raise that building, whatever it is, I think in this case, about 2.5 to 3 feet. Wouldn't have to be done. However, you would have to flood-proof the building, and that obviously increases costs and especially insurance costs. So that is one exemption. Also in 2.6, let's see. I probably should have had all this in the packet, but it allows you 2.6.26, sorry, it's hard to, or 5, I mean, in T5 DC, the historic, so in this specific district, the Historic Review Board may permit deviations from the minimum height requirements listed above if doing so would allow a structure to be more compatible with the surrounding context. So those are things, so you have the power to grant exemptions to this. And one of those exemption is also to lower basically the height of a commercial building. So like each ceiling height of the floor. So that's something you can also consider. So I just wanted to put that out there because that was a question from some of the board members of what are your abilities per code? How is the building to be measured per code? So hopefully I stated that, and I know I sent you an email with those code references. So those are all things that you should be aware of. They did reduce the building height by 1.5 feet from the last meeting. I'm sure they'll get into their presentation about that. They also essentially shortened the building to 99.5 feet. I know that was a question at the last meeting, the 100-foot requirement and the interpretation of that. So they've shortened that to 99.5 feet. And they've obviously produced some new material standards, and I'll let them make that up presentation. Otherwise, again, this is preliminary. I think you're trying to cross all those I's and T's. And I'll let the applicants kind of give their presentation on how they're making changes since that meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Freeze. Go ahead and. Mr.
Jeremy, I
Perry.
think you have that in our packet, so you might as well just put that up and we'll let Adam go through there.
Thank you, Kurt, for talking us through that. Thank you all for seeing us again today. I guess the easiest thing to do would be to run through our responses and then circle back on any that we'd like to touch on in addition, if that's all right with y'all. First sheet there obviously is y'all's letter that provided to us. Item number 1 was removing the central raised portion of the gable parapet walls of the 3-story mass, east and west, and making it the parapet one single gable, or reducing the height of the central gable portion. So on the next slide, we did take a look at removing the central portion altogether. What that did is it made the building appear incredibly squatty. It got rid of a lot of the lines that we were trying to carry, and it is something that no one was really in favor of. So we reduced the overall height of the end parapet wall to by 1.6 feet. And what that took us down to then for median height is a lot of papers here. 42 feet, 11 inches is the median roof height then for that parapet along that facade for the 3-story portion. Keep in mind, a 3-story building is allowed at the property line. 3-story building as defined by the code is 15 feet per story, and that's floor to ceiling, not floor to floor. We are way under that at the 45, we're at 42, which could have been higher if we went and did the full 15 floor to ceiling. So that's item number 1. The imagery is on the following page. Item number 2, converting the storefront windows of the 3-story mass to gang double hung windows was the comment. However, I think there was some other discussion that they would like to see, you would like to see a different window, maybe not a ganged window like the 2-story portion. So we opted to go with a steel window, more of an industrial looking steel window. The cut sheets for those are in the packet as well. But it's a very industrial looking, high quality, good steel window. There was some comment with the overall fenestration, that was discussed. The changes being that on the first floor, that whole opening now has the steel windows and doors in it. Additional, mullions, muttons were added in the windows above. Like to maybe circle back on that, get your thoughts and feedback, if you like that direction or not, but that was a direction provided by staff that we adhered to and we went forward with. But again, we'd be happy to discuss that in additional detail, but I'm gonna keep running through these and we'll circle back on any of the others. Number 3, not supportive of vinyl clad windows, in recommendation of fiberglass clad or aluminum clad. The use of aluminum clad or vinyl clad windows was never intended. It was always aluminum clad windows, which is the E series from Anderson. So that was a typo on our behalf. Number 4, remove the metal board and batten panels. It's not a material frequently seen in a historic district, with the recommendation of using smooth cementitious siding. We think with that larger span, some cementitious siding may not be the best option, but we did get rid of the board and batten siding in lieu of a flat panel metal, a flush seam metal panel, which it doesn't have that. It doesn't look like it's something it's not. It's a flush seam metal panel for that elevation is what we're proposing. Cut sheets for that again are provided. Number 5, reduce the thickness of the metal awnings and provide brackets or cables that are visually supported. Applicant to note the color at the final review. Great recommendation. We did shrink that canopy down, added the brackets, and it was a great suggestion, great comment. So thank you again for that. Number 6, applicant to provide color renderings at final. We'll be happy to do that. Number 7, applicant to provide typical sections and details for final review. We have some typical sections included in this package, but we will have more detailed ones at final when we get there. Number 8, applicant to provide cut sheet for any railings. A cut sheet has been provided. It's aluminum rail. And the selections have been circled or squared, I should say, in those selections. Number 9, restudy the height and scale of the center building, as is currently the height is felt to be too tall. We updated that when we lowered the building down per comment number 1, we updated its relationship to the adjacent buildings. And again, looking at the heights as per the code with the 15 feet per story, we feel that we're within code with where we're at with taking it down that 1'6". Not only within code for the 15 feet, within comparison to our neighbors. One thing to note about this height diagram is the 700 Bay Street building is shown from Bay Street. It's not shown from the backside, the parking lot side, which would give it an extra 8 or 9 feet because you can pull under that building from the rear. So if we were going to stack those on even planes, it's going to be 8 foot taller than in this diagram. So it's going to be well above where our building is proposed to be. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Number 10, consider an alternative material for EIFS. I know EIFS was noted in the packet, and that was a great catch. That was definitely a typo. There was never an intention to use EIFS. It's not the system for this building. Instead, we intend to use a 3-coat stucco finish with a drainage board. I know again that there was some thoughts on constructability. This will be on an 8-inch metal stud wall with a hardy backer, cement backer. In an ideal world, yes, it would be block. Stucco on block makes the most sense, but weight in the soil bearing on this site, we want to try and make it, as light as possible. So if I'm not mistaken, that concludes the comments. Be happy to talk, like I said, in more detail about any particular one, or let you guys discuss and chime back in if you need me
All
to.
right. I'm sure we'll come back to you.
Do have this that I want to give you. Little diagram showing voting lights on the section.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Berry. We'll, open the floor to public comment at this point. Any public comment related to this building?
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name's Dick Stewart. We own the building across Scott Street from where this proposed building will go. I've been able to find on the plans and would encourage you to require that there be a plan for managing trash or excess debris that would be outside, so it does not end up on the sidewalk on Scott Street. This has been an issue of some concern throughout the city. We're having problems elsewhere. Perhaps with the shortening of the building, there could be a corral or something. What we ended up doing at the end, when we redid Old Bay about 23 or 4 years ago, is we created a room on Port Republic Street that closes and the trash is in there and the trash company comes and knows to pick it up. With the restaurant and the other stuff on the middle floor and the upper bar, there's going to be a lot of stuff created here. Some of it's not going to be attractive. And so we want to make sure that we don't experience overnight created problems. We've got some problems in the park with different kind of creatures now, some human, some not. And we don't want to create an attractive nuisance. So if we could just address that, make that part of your approval, I'd certainly appreciate it. And I suspect our neighbors would as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any other public comment? Smith.
Hello, Jeremiah Smith at 1107 West Street. Just want to offer my support as a resident of the Historic District. I think this kind of infill is just what we need. Less space for cars and more for people and neighbors, and I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Sunderland, come on up, please.
Good afternoon, Lisa Sunderla, Historic Beaufort Foundation. Want to thank the applicants for making the changes that they did, especially the reduction in height of the parapet by over a foot. I think that definitely improves the height, mass, and scale of that property. We're in agreement mostly with staff's comments, excepting for three. One with regard to the ganged windows. We felt the ganged windows were actually a better, more appropriate kind of a design feature on the property. I don't know if Jeremiah can show those ganged windows again so everybody can kind of remember what they looked like prior to. There. So is that now or is that? Okay, there. Okay, left is, yeah, in preliminary. So I think we were more comfortable with the gained window treatment. And so we would recommend that consideration be given to going back to the gained window treatment. We also support the flush theme metal panel and feel that that is an appropriate treatment for the property and also gives that hint back to historically the warehouse structures along the waterfront. We also had one other comment with regard to the transom above the door on the east elevation. If y'all look at that, it's kind of an overly large transom. And right now it's single panel and we'd like to see that, or single light, we'd like to see that broken up into multiple lights. We understand that they had no choice in the height of that transom. Is that correct? Okay, so they had to make it the size that it is, but I think it just makes it look off kilter with that large transom window. So if they broke that up, I think that might help with minimizing the visual with regard to the height of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there public comment in the audience? Seeing none, do we have anybody online wish to comment?
No, sir.
All right, so you know the public comment, we'll bring it back up here for board discussion. I'm sure we'll have some questions. Anyone like to start off? I have a few when we get to my turn. Be glad to start while y'all think through it. So we talk about the flush panels a minute. You know, I'm worried about those flush panels being used only because if they're not solid backing, what's gonna happen over time, they're gonna be dented and bent, and they're gonna really look like hell after a while. So you gotta make sure they're not a floating panel that doesn't have any compression strength. It'd be like somebody punching an EPA stucco and leaving you can't fix it. You know, you have to replace it. So I'd rather make sure whatever you use for a substrate there will last the test of time.
Are you referring to number 4?
That is the number 4. The way that cut sheet shows is on the screen right here. It's a flush panel. My assumption is that the legs are what hold it off the wall. And the front panel, the seams, are the only thing holding it out. That means it's hollow behind it.
Look at additional options for that and or additional backing if you have it.
Yeah.
Consider that.
Okay, great. You see what I was saying, Michelle?
Mm-hmm.
Number 5, actually.
Number 4.
The other thing I think, well, I'm sure the other board members have a lot of questions on height, and I have some, but I think mine are more based on your site plan. It talks about the elevations, and you have a mean sea level showing it at just over almost 7 foot at the back door, but your drawing is based on a 10 foot. And I'm not sure how that affects the roadway and the current sidewalks, but if it is indeed 7 foot, and I don't know that it is, you'd have a 6 foot rise and not a 3 foot rise, which means all your landing and setbacks are inappropriate for this building. So that definitely needs to be flushed out, or your side entrance won't work, and your front entrance to the park, you'll have 8 feet between it and the entry doors instead of the 12 or 15 that you showed. We need to confirm what the sea level is, what the existing grade is. It shows 10. I know that the seawall's 7 and the park floods. So if we look at your topo and it shows it being 6.8 with the flood, FEMA flood line showing a 9 foot around it as being the last flood zone. So that draws some concern about the elevation of your building off the grade. If it indeed is 6 feet high, you know, that's not the case, right?
No, that's not the case. If you move, sorry.
Is it 10?
Yeah, it's hard. It is 10. Well, it's gonna have to be 10 or raised up to 10. If you look at the wall that runs along between that and Carteret Street, that's where we're pulling the height from, and that site will have to be raised.
You're talking about, what I'm talking about is your grade, when you step off your building.
Yes, sir.
Onto grade at the sidewalk at the rear.
Yes, sir.
What grade is that sidewalk gonna be?
That sidewalk will remain.
And do you know what the elevation of it is now?
I can't read it. It's too small, but I can pretty quickly find out.
Like 6.68 with 6.
It's around 6 feet.
So, I mean, that's the question, is your landings and your stair treads and your setbacks all change based on
Yes,
just
sir.
even 1 foot, as you know. So
Sir.
if you're showing 10 foot on your specs,
On
I'm
our
seeing
sections, yes,
6,
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
That means there's a difference of 3 feet that's not on the drawings.
Yes, sir. At the one end. Yes, sir. No, I get what you're saying. I understand what you're.
Follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir, I do.
So I don't know that that's something that we can solve here today, but it's something that I haven't gotten a clear answer on what the real truth is. I don't know what the real truth is. I'm just concerned, okay?
Yes, sir. No,
right,
it's a
good.
valid concern. It's something we'll look into.
Need to look at that. Anybody else have anything to talk about while I think through this a little bit?
I couldn't find where the ceiling heights were for each floor.
It's this.
He just gave us
We
that
just
copy.
got it.
Oh, okay, so that's,
It's also-
okay.
It's also in the packet as well. That's just a blown up to show.
It's helpful, actually. And
Yeah, I can't read it.
and as I understood, that lower floor could have been 15, but you.
They all
reduced-
could have.
Right, but you reduced it
Yes, ma'am.
to just try to keep that,
That building down.
bring the building down.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I don't have a copy, but I looked. So, yeah, so what we have currently is a 12-foot floor to underside of framing and a 14 from floor to floor. So that 12 could have been a 15 is.
Right.
What I'm
Okay.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, 12 seems kind of like minimal for. what
Correct.
you want on
For
a
that
lot,
large of a
that's-
space,
That large of a space,
Yes,
yeah. I mean,
yes,
That'd
ma'am.
be nicer at 15.
it would be a lot nicer, but that was a compromise we made to
Yeah,
get it
I
down.
get it.
Good question, sir.
Yes, sir.
The vertical panels that you're showing on the north elevation, do you have any of those same panels on the south elevation to reflect what's there? It seemed like where you have your upper roof bar, it's mostly open or glass, but any of those panels go to the opposite side for the consistency?
Any of that side on will be, yes,
That'll
sir.
be the same material?
Yes, sir. Yeah, well,
Should have asked this question last meeting, but what's the intention of the three? Is the three, it designed as three buildings and it just merge, or is it two buildings?
two buildings,
So the terminus on the park side, it's sort of like an infill porch, but it's not really.
correct.
What's the thought behind that? Because it's almost like that's an anomaly, if you will, because it's not a porch, or maybe is that the intent? I'm asking and answering, so I'll stop.
No, that portion has evolved from multiple meetings, from the early TRC meetings to early meetings with the HBF. That portion has really evolved. We didn't want to copy a reclaimed porch. We wanted to give a new take on a reclaimed porch, if you would. And so that's kind of how that portion has evolved, to get that light in the windows onto the river. And to, at night act semi like a lantern, because you'll see that light from the river. So that's how, the long and short, that's how that's evolved. Many back and forths with various.
A more
boards.
modern interpretation to an infill porch, is that?
Sure.
That sounds like, yeah. All right.
I have a couple of questions. The plan shows that the building is at 44.7 feet tall at its highest point. That's not counting the point with the glass. That's another, what, 3 or 4 feet? The point, the highest point?
Line you're talking about on the,
Yeah,
44.7 is to the top of the parapet. The reason we retained that dimension string is because that's what was on our original submission. So we wanted to show how that was lowered. So you are correct. It's probably closer to 45 even at the peak of that. It's not much higher. I could get you the exact, but
okay.
as it is stepped back, we didn't.
It says 47.5 to the tallest point, correct?
44 point.
That's to the rafter. The 47.5 was to the tallest.
that's the ridge of the parapet.
Yeah,
Talk me through this again. I'm sorry.
He has it on the screen as well.
yeah. Can you see? All right, so it says right there, 47.5 to the highest tip of the building.
That's 44.7.
44 feet 7 inches. That's where I was getting confused. Yes, ma'am. That's what it says to the top of the parapet wall on the
47.5.
44.7.
Okay, then what is the number to the left?
I'm sorry.
It reaches all the way up.
You are right. You are
Okay.
right. 47.5. That's correct.
All right. So that is 8 feet taller than the Merrill Lynch building. And almost 18 feet higher than the building behind it on Bay, which is the Rustic Pup. Am I correct?
I don't have the dimensions on those other buildings.
Okay, because you had the drawings on there, but there were no dimensions.
Correct.
So I had to go and try to look that stuff up myself. The integrity study on page 25 states that the Merrill Lynch building proves out of scale with the surrounding historic district. So when I'm taking into consideration, because that's all I can do, is the preservation manual and the integrity study and the Beaufort Code, this tells me that this building is still too high for the historic district. I liked Kurt's idea of maybe lowering the, being able to lower the building by lowering the foundation. So, if that's something you would consider to bring it down, because I think the building overall is very nice looking. I just still think it's way out of scale. If you look at our preservation manual and you look at the drawings on here, everything that says no is what we're doing. And that concerns me.
Relates to the Cornice Heights, should always be close. Yeah, one of the things I'm concerned a little bit about, well, first of all, I do appreciate the building, and I think infill is important, and I always support infill. I struggle with the height as well, and I keep hoping that, we find a way to bring it down more significant than it is. The problem I have is that we use 700 Bay, for example, as a benchmark, and you spoke to that a couple of times, but it's taller than that building now, and there was huge debates from the HDRB when 700 Bay was done about elevation, and it's a new construction. The building I think we should be focused on is the Saltus building, which is next door to this structure as a significant historic structure, not a new construction. So the board here, what we struggle with is the fact that we have the Beaufort Code that gives us the generic footprint that would be proper if you didn't have an HDRB and you went by that finite numbers. And then you have the subjective board like this that has to sit there and try to compare it to adjacent historic structures and the integrity of the overall district. So though it seems to fit, it does seem to be taller than it needs to be. And we're not quite sure, because I don't know if we really know what it's going to be used for. I mean, the office, it's like a shell building.
Show
With
building.
no
that's correct.
purpose. And so here we are debating a building that didn't define a real need before it was conceived.
Yes, sir. As presented both last time and this time, it is designed currently as mixed use with restaurant and business.
Yeah, I understand, hopefully we'll get a nice restaurant and
There you go.
hopefully we'll have some parking so the people that want to rent for businesses will actually be willing to lease from the landowner.
No doubt about it. And one thing I do want to touch on, again, I mentioned the height, the building height diagram. Both 700 Bay, 801 doesn't count because it sits on Bay Street and it doesn't have any fall. But the Saltus building has the same amount of fall as we're talking about here. So from the very, sidewalk level to back to where the warehouse portion of that building starts, there's, 2 to 3 feet of fall there as well. So if you add the 8 feet or 9 feet that the 700 Bay is up above and from the rear, and you add, we're right there. I mean, within feet.
Jeremy, do you want to do that comparison again? I think that's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah, and there are no measurements on that, so I had to kind of,
Yeah, so real quick,
Yeah.
I'm kind of guessing as well because it's not I don't have the access to an accurate drawing, but if you look at this is the side diagram, west elevation proposed. This is that raised seating area. So if you measure from the finished floor and just move this kind of as best you can over, I think it gives a more accurate reading. Again, assuming that the diagram for 802 Bay Street is also an accurate reading. And again,
Jeremy, can I also ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
I mean, given the fact that it's set back within
Block.
the front, it's in the middle of the block, it's not just a block building.
Yeah.
Does that influence any of the
for
way
me,
you consider this
For
map?
me, yeah, for me it does because it is mid-block. This is not sitting right up at Bay Street. I mean, this is probably a fairly good viewpoint, which you see from Bay. You're looking back at this. You're looking across a low slung building in front of it, but this sits very much in the middle of this block. And for me, I think that the applicant's done a very good job of trying to mitigate that, along with the constraints they have with having to elevate it for flood. And also make the spaces inside not feel restricted because of ceiling heights being too low.
And then when you compare it with the Merrill Lynch building, which is just one big block, more or less, which I think gives the block an overall, in my opinion, unattractive overall appearance.
Right.
I think that's a big factor in what is to be considered about height.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Price.
I'm considering based on what we're told to go by. The integrity study, the preservation manual, And I mean, I'm taking my own opinion out of all this. I'm going strictly by the book. And the book says that it's too big for this area. That's how I read it.
Which,
And I wouldn't want to see them lower the ceiling heights inside the building either. I'm thinking the foundation is the answer. If we lower the foundation.
And that speaks to Mr. Sutton's point as well, as taking another closer look at where that actually is going to be. We have it at 10, like you say, the topo's there. So lowering that some there, that's going to,
Well, then I would like to, look at it then and not
Would-
make any decisions now.
That qualify more for your codes issue? I mean, versus the overall preliminary design? I mean, if
Correct.
you can't
It
pass
is.
the code, you can't pass the codes.
that's a fact.
Right, so this is a preliminary.
This is a
conceptual.
preliminary approval, and so we can continue to develop the design. And yes, so that's what we're seeking today, is to continue on towards the final that checks all the boxes, not only for the Historic Preservation Manual, the Beaufort Code, but also the International Building Code, FEMA, and all the rest of the
Right.
rules and regulations. So we just wanted the opportunity to move the next step.
so I'm gonna disagree with you. The,
Wouldn't be the first time.
that's right. There's a few things I do have questions on. I stole your piece of paper and I'm gonna read from it. So page 64, from the Preservation Manual, Chapter 5, I see what you highlighted. You said if large-scale construction is to be allowed, particular attention should be given to locational aspects, siting, setbacks, and facade treatments of the proposed building. This situation is discussed in more detail under a subsequent section on high-density construction. I read that and I look at the comparison and I think it is,
I'm looking at these buildings.
right, but this is showing specifically how this illustration does not relate to these buildings. What they've done on their, I forget what page it is they're showing that this structure, based on the sizing, does relate to it. This is a relativistic paragraph. It's saying the size needs to be relativistically in keeping with its surroundings.
So have you looked at the building behind it, which is 18 feet taller than?
I'm looking at the center of it, the mass and scale of the center and the back, because that's the building we're looking at, in comparison to the other buildings that are immediately adjacent, like the Saltus building, the 700 Bay building.
See the view southwest, the part that faces Bay. If,
I think that's a false equivalence. I don't
You
think
do?
that, yeah, I don't think that it should be the one as a point of comparison, because it's basically a block away. You're really comparing it more to the Saltus building, 700 Bay. I think the ones they depicted in the presentation are the appropriate ones to compare it to. I don't think that would be a fair comparison.
well, I'm going,
But that's just
Yeah.
one man's opinion.
and I'm going by what has been objected to in the past. Looking at our preservation manual and looking at the integrity study.
I did have a question about, Jeremy, you threw up a picture that had, it showed original submission and pre-con submission. It had two diagrams right next to each other with the verbiage above it. I don't remember. Yep, that. Okay. We initially asked about slimming the profile of the awning on the first floor. But if you look at the detail above which you did on the preliminary submission, and so now it's not the same thickness as the detail above the second story windows. Does anybody, you're an architect, how do you think about that?
And that's, it gets kind of misunderstood quite a bit. The second story it's not an awning. It's
It's just a window detail.
it's a beam. It's an implied beam in the stucco. So so for them to be different doesn't bother me.
Okay,
'Cause
because
I think
it's
having,
setback.
yeah, and having the two awnings match at ground level, to me, is more important than having a fat one and a skinny one.
Right, so, right, what you're saying, the window detail is not protruding at all from the building, so those being a difference in thickness is not,
Correct.
Okay.
But good question.
I did like, I don't know that this is the purview of our body, but, Mr. Stewart's comments about trash, I don't know, there's some space between your building and the one behind it. I don't know if there's room to build the thing there
We-
for
we-
trash
I think
or.
it's 7 or 8 feet.
We
between
we did touch on that. If you look on the first floor plan, it's small. They're going the owners and operators gonna have to really manage, but there, if you look to the east, northeast corner, there's a set of stairs and there's 2 doors. Number 19, I think, calls out for metal doors for trash deposit.
I'm on that page now. Talk me onto it again.
So it's be the northeast corner of the plan. Or top right. See a door and some stairs down, and then there's a keynote number 19 with showing 2 double doors on street level. It says metal trash doors, deposit yard.
Trash, I see.
Oh,
Yeah.
right here.
Yes,
Metal door for trash. Oh, I see. Yep. Oh, that's so on the east side of the building.
yes, sir, but behind a screen. and-
Right.
You feel that's adequate for a restaurant?
Again, like I said, there's just gonna have to be ample considerations made. That may be just held there temporarily. And then I know other restaurants downtown, they have to take it down to one end of the park or the other end of the park, and there's bigger dumpsters there that, so that's gonna be an operations issue.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of what I was alluding to. I don't know that that's my job or our job to make comments on because it's not dealing specifically with architectural stuff, but I think it's a good point and ought to be considered by you guys going forward.
And if we can enlarge that, in any way possible, we will.
So you're saying that the double doors is a storage closet?
It's not a storage closet. It's a low metal fence. There's a better image of it.
Oh, I see. So that indention,
Indention, and then is
you know, part of it's a landing that goes
correct. Yes, sir.
down to get out of the building.
And part of it's trash.
Part of it is open space.
Yeah, that doesn't look big enough, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, even though it may not be something, code compliance is one thing, but also aesthetics and practical use. You really have missed the point on what you're gonna do with the restaurant services. Because carrying garbage bales down staircases, if you don't have an internal elevator for the staff to do it, if it comes from the second floor full of beer bottles, is not likely to be a pleasant journey.
I understand
And
that.
second, going out to the street with no place to put it and to take the cigarette break, there's no place to do it.
Sure.
So
So we may have to enlarge that. Again, that would be internal. It wouldn't come
Yeah.
outside of the shelf.
but I think that's a fair question for the board to ask you to
Yeah.
come back to
Yes, sir.
before final to say, how have you solved that issue? Because we know it's a concern for every operator downtown. In fact, I know they'd rather not have to send their staff all the way to the marina to dump garbage.
I understand that.
But
Yes,
we
sir.
struggle with that in the commercial collection area all the time.
Well, I'm now sorry that I brought it up because I don't think it matters until they, I don't think it matters until they actually say they want to enlarge it. I think, like you said, I thought it was a good point. It's a pragmatic point that Mr. Stewart brought. And I like pragmatism, so I thought I'd mention it, but now I regret it. Because I don't think it's not relevant for us until they bring something to us that adjusts the design on the outside.
Well, we're asking, we gotta give them something. Look, they're asking for
Yeah.
preliminary.
I think,
They leave here, they don't have final, if they have preliminary, unless you want to give them final. But the point being is, every bit of this conversation is important, because we have the codes, we also have the subjectivity of a historic review board. And again, I'll say it one more time, if we didn't need HRB, and this book guided, we wouldn't have any of this conversation right now, because it'd be up to HTRC to go through it, would need HRB, follow the cookie cutter program, and it is what it is, right? There's very limited infill opportunity unless some dramatic thing happens to Beaufort. This is one of very few buildings that may ever get built in the waterfront in my lifetime, probably. It ought to be as good as it can get.
I was gonna say, we need to get it right.
We don't need a building that's not gonna last the test of time, but I think it's an attractive building. I think height's an issue so far. I do have a concern about the service side of it, how it services. I have a concern about the elevations, being accurate, so you don't end up, it building code permitting, they're saying it's gonna be 6 feet high instead of 3 feet high before you come in.
Yeah,
the, I mean, I'm in favor of it. I think that the elevations thing you brought up is a good point with the 6-foot grade versus 10-foot and how that's gonna affect it. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that certainly needs to be fleshed out. I think they've done pretty much everything we've asked them to do since the first one. I am actually more sympathetic to what, Lisa was saying with the windows. But, I'm somewhat agnostic to that. But I think it meets the mail for me to get a preliminary. I think the elevations thing should be a condition, so that would need to be proved at, final.
I
And how
think
they're
it-
addressing that.
You don't think it needs to be proved before we go further?
I would think that would need to be proved at final.
Yeah, I agree.
It can be approved at final. I mean, if they come back in and they haven't finished all the stuff for preliminary conversation, they
Just kick
can't
it
get
back.
final anyway. So you could approve, the final application could be just another preliminary approval.
I mean, it has
Kick
to
it
meet
back.
code. I mean, at the end of the day, it has to meet code to be built.
Yeah, but the problem with the elevation piece is if it's a topo, I mean, I don't think it's a topo because I've seen that park flood. I think it's probably is 7 feet. It's a street back there, not 10. That's a huge problem though, because we can't raise the street and we can't raise the sidewalks. So the building has to get smaller in order to accommodate.
Right.
the-
Or we have to get additional stairs down on the property.
Yeah, you have to set back further to get the rise and
Well-
run to correct itself,
Correct.
right?
Or,
So
well, it's a high end of the property where the ramp is. I think we're good. I think it's the low end, so we would have to, but we do have ample room to add additional stairs.
well, you've
to
got
get
a
that in.
side entrance dumping out next to Saltus Building that if the elevation's wrong, you have to add 3 more steps. That's 21 inches or better,
Correct,
you know,
but
or
I think,
36
I think
inches.
that's where we are good. But again, I want to come back at a final and
Yep.
prove that.
Would
That's-
you be
that's what I-
comfortable if they put a condition on you that stated that you do a thorough study of, elevation? and grade?
That's fine.
Yeah, well, we haven't got to that point, but I think, Kurt, that's exactly the direction we're going.
Yeah.
is Find the few bullets we're seeing here, and I think it's not a difficult one. I think the one we can't resolve really is the fact that I think most people here believe it's too tall. And how do you, every building has come for us for new construction, meeting the current Beaufort code has ended up being extremely taller than we anticipate. I mean, every one of them. They've all come in and said, because we wrote this code, it said 15 feet and this and flood line, you gotta be above flood. And then you don't have to count the 7 feet of the attic space. If it's over 7 feet, doesn't count as a story. I mean, you end up with a huge pitched roof and this thing jumps into the sky. So
And that's why we've done literally everything we can, taking the ceiling heights down. We can't lower the ceiling heights. I mean, we're as low as we really can go on everything. And so that's.
there's more
and-
to the,
And
there's
we're
more
in
to the code than just the 15 foot. They forget that there's infrastructure between floors and there's girders and beam systems and,
sir,
you know, those things are required. So you can't just go 15, then start the next floor.
I
So
understand.
you understand that, but most people probably wouldn't get that.
That's why, that's why I thought that diagram would be helpful for those that didn't understand what we're attempting to do is bring it down as much as we can.
As part of that review, I believe in the original comments from the staff was addressing the height of a parapet wall.
And we did that. We reduced that to 1'6".
18
If you
inches.
go lower, conceivably, right, does the parapet wall have to extend up that far? I mean.
We could possibly, we could possibly bring it down 1 more foot. I think now the height difference between those two parapets, I looked it up before I came because is 2 feet. If you get too close, then then you lose the whole concept of it stepping up, especially, being 2.5, 3 stories up in the air. There has to be some relativeness in scale, so you don't lose that step.
Or you have no pitch.
Or you have none. And like I said, we did do a study and it's just way too squatty. I mean, it is. If you do a single pitch,
What do you propose that third floor is gonna be used for?
it's for roof access. I mean, that's where the elevator comes up through and
So that whole top floor,
it'd be a conditioned space on the 3rd floor. Yes, sir. I mean, with the elevator, the stair coming up into it,
that's gonna, I mean, it's not part of the restaurant at this point, you know,
possibly, yes, yeah.
could be.
Yeah, I mean, if you
And
want to
this is
stand
what
out in the sun,
bothers
you
me.
kind of need a place to get out of the sun. on the-
It is kind of bothers me is that we don't know how this building is going to be used. And that, I mean, it could come back and say, well, we're going to use it for condos. And then if it's commercial, it's out of our purview to worry about the parking. But if it is going to be used for residential, then we do have to think about parking.
Well, there is parking exemption properties and T.
Mm, I went back and looked at other minutes.
It does say non-commercial.
Exactly.
It's
It says
designed,
none.
it's designed as a restaurant and business.
Well,
Okay, so can we put that on the
It's on,
plan?
it's on there, yes, ma'am. It's,
They'd have to get a change of use
Would get a
approved from
change
the
of
city,
use.
yeah.
and they wouldn't, right?
They would have to dedicate parking an easement from another property within.
Exactly. And that's why I question that
We wouldn't-
because,
We wouldn't be allowed for code to allow the change of use.
And, right, I don't think that, and I understand your concern, I'm not trying to dismiss it.
No, thank you.
The two counterpoints I would provide is, we've gone through our own, trials and tribulations of doing change of uses with buildings. It's not as simple as, well, we're just gonna make this condos. They'd have to prove that they can meet all these new things, and they wouldn't be able to, so they wouldn't be able to retroactively turn it into condos.
And the
And I also-
infrastructure wouldn't be there. It'd be so costly to put the infrastructure in for this to become condos at a later date. It would almost be
Well, yeah,
prohibitive.
maybe, I don't know about that, I just know that, one, I don't know that the use of the building is necessarily, for us to decide. And two, I don't think they could retroactively change it.
I think
not
it is
simple.
for us to decide if it has to do with parking. If it's residential versus commercial, it has to do with parking.
But we're not city council.
Okay.
We're a design review
No.
board.
No,
Well,
That's
well,
correct.
again, the code has an exemption for anything but residential, as you rightfully stated, and it's actually right before, I think what we're getting at. But if they were going to change the use, which is not what you're hearing today, because that's
right.
essentially allows all manner of uses in T5DC, and I don't think you have the discretion to say one use or not, because it's in the code. But if they were to change that, it becomes a building and a zoning code issue. So the building would have to be brought up to whatever the residential standard is or a mixed-use building. And then the zoning code would kick in the parking requirement. The parking requirement would require however many units to have a parking space per unit, right? And then they'd have to provide that within a certain distance with a easement in perpetuity, if they obviously are not going to have parking on site. And that easement of perpetuity have to go, obviously would be with this building forever before we could approve it. And that wouldn't come back to the HRB. That would be purely a matter of the building and zoning code. Does that make sense? So it's not in your purview, but it would be required, even if you approved it today and, they decided to turn that into 30 apartments or something, that would all get triggered. He'd have to find, parking spaces within that
Correct.
300 feet area for all of those units.
All right. And it was just my question because it's never been said exactly how the building was going to be used other than a restaurant and a bar. So that was my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
All right, let's rein this back in. Let's go back to the fundamental issues that I've heard today. Really, the only one really that sticks out is there any way to lower it? I'm hearing there's not, other than losing ceiling to floor height, and it's already tight. So I'm hearing some pushback from the applicant that that's something they don't want to do. I think there's minor concerns, and so it sounds like it's very close to preliminary, the minor concerns on the windows, and that's just from the nonprofit group, HBF, about gang versus non-gang. I like the metal windows, the mutton divided windows. I think it's a good look for that building. I'm very happy they did not decide to use EFS, and they went with some inch of space, even though EFS is not totally horrible, just wrong, I think, for our environment, for longevity. The method they mentioned is better. I would love it to be cinder block and brick, so it would definitely be there for a while. And if you look at the fabric of Bay Street and you look at the historic buildings and you look at the ones that have been retrofitted, you'll see lots of brick veneer used after the original building. But one thing you also need to understand is that the downtown core district is a special fire district in the city that requires sprinkling, which they've done, but also it negates the ability really to use wood construction for like siding and stuff. You don't see a lot of that being done today, because if we get a fire downtown, it's probably gonna burn the whole thing down before we can get it out. So we want this building to be like it's designed and not be, additional fire hazard in the core. I actually, from earlier comments, I think I agree, and I've been going around this around and around, is that if you were gonna do a tall building, on that side of Bay Street, that the mid-block is the appropriate place to do it. And that from the park view, the step back works, from the street side, the existing structure gives the appearance of that. Now, I've seen other applicants come before earlier boards to try to do a step back to get the fourth story. We're not talking about that here, but the problem is it's always been denied to do a step back, even though it's in our code. I don't think it's practical to do a side step back on this in order to decrease that volume of that one building. So I'm leaning in support of what we see today for preliminary, with the staff comments noted.
And then would we add the restudy the elevation? Just to-
Yeah,
just
that,
to
and that would be part of it. I mean, basically, I think they're very close. I think the elevation just needs to be proven before
right,
they
right.
can do a final drawing to show us what it would be at final. But I think if you have comments on the windows or the other pieces, the metal, we'll look at color next time. Maybe look at materials next time further, but I mean, right now I see, I think it's fair to ask exactly for final, they're gonna present the final colors of materials. But at least one applicant, the board at that time made them put up not in the code, put up a storyboard to show the materials, so you knew how it felt on the street. And that's something the board got to decide if they're gonna go that direction. So in other words, if there's gonna be brick and mortar used, what's the brick and mortar look like? If there's gonna be stucco used, what's the final finish? Because usually stucco is a one-time thing. The paint color is mixed into the final finish. So you're not likely to say, we don't like that shade of salmon, let's get it a little bit lighter, and they go paint the building. That's not how it's gonna work. It's gotta be right the first time. And then the roof material. So at final, we need to see all those details. Anybody got any questions related to any of those pieces?
So are we not even going to consider asking them to lower the foundation due to flood proofing? Ask them to flood
they have a-
proof and,
Yeah, we can ask them. I mean, I don't know that that's something that, it's in code, you have an option to do that. They can either flood proof it or not. And it goes back to the ultimate height. If they did flood proof it, then they would be below 13 feet
right,
for a commercial building. That would shave off 6 feet, potentially 5, 6 feet, depending on how you look at it, of this building, right? Is it appropriate to put a building in flood harmed way down there?
Well, I think the logic, we gotta look at the logic, right? Why would you ask them to lower it? You would ask them to lower it if you thought that the height and mass didn't work, which that's what you think,
that's my opinion,
which I understand.
based on my research.
Right, which is fair, and I love you, and I think it's great. I tend to disagree, so I would not ask them to go through the extra expense of trying to lower it when I think it already relates to its neighbors in the context appropriately. So especially with where the midsection is. So the logic would be, if you think it's too tall, then maybe you would ask them potentially. If you don't think it's too tall, then you wouldn't ask them to do that. So I would not lean towards asking them to do that.
Is that something y'all would even consider?
Sorry, building? Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I'm getting back up. Yes, ma'am, it is something we would consider. And I think that's gonna be part of Mr. Sutton's
Okay.
request to study the
Look,
heights on the seat. But it's only gonna be raised based on the actual grade, or lowered, I'm sorry, based on the actual grades and flood. So it's not like we're gonna say, well, let's take it all the way down and we're gonna now we have to flood proof everything clear up this high. If that's not, does that make sense? It's gonna be based on.
You're saying at most, it's gonna be like a foot or so. It's not gonna
It's
be,
not gonna be
you're not
6
gonna
feet.
take 5
I mean,
feet
we can't-
away.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's
And,
not
and
gonna
just,
get-
just back to your point, Ms. Rita, if on the scope of work,
Or maybe that would.
item number B,
Foot doesn't help.
Ms. Rita,
Mhm.
scope of work, G 101, item number B, the intended uses are
Oh,
listed
okay.
there. Thank you.
Is it on this plan? Because I found it very hard to read. I'm 65 years old and I can't read this type. I don't know who can, but I would like to have bigger plans.
I
That's
can.
my vote.
We'll get you
All
bigger
right, look,
plans
we're,
next time.
we're beating this thing up now, I think. Let's hear, Michelle, do you have anything constructive and or other related?
I think as long as they meet I think that it was a very successful design to put it to put the height in the middle. I think when you took the shift and you looked at the Saltus building, which is a historic building, even though it doesn't reflect as a historic building on the Saltus side, but it is, I think it feels very blockish and doesn't have any ups and downs, particularly from that elevation. I think it's a pretty building to look at from
Okay.
the park.
Thank you.
Would you, anything?
Well, I just want to clarify, so at the next submittal, all of the elevation of the sidewalk and the finished floor, that one will be addressed and in effect finalized?
Yes, sir.
We understand exactly the implications.
Everything will be done. I mean, on our end, we'd like to be able to take it, get it into building codes after our next meeting.
All right, thank you.
All right, look, I'm not hearing a whole lot of new information other than it's too tall, which we hear regularly, and I get it. I'm with you, Rita. I just don't know how to bring it down or give any constructive criticism. And for that reason, I'm gonna ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to give preliminary approval with the staff conditions, and then I would add the condition that they restudy the elevation as discussed, the topographic as discussed.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion is second. We can discuss or debate a little further at that point, which I think it's a great motion. I think what you've heard here today is studying the actual elevations, topography to make sure that the building can actually be built as designed for the first floor elevation at 13 feet mean sea level. That'll answer a lot of other questions that will help you understand and help us, and it may or may not reduce the length of the building. It might even reduce the height of the building, some depends on what you find out. It also will tell you whether you're willing to go down the road of floodproofing to accomplish what you're trying to get. So that'll be a lot of good stuff to hear back at final. What else is you, the staff comments?
Yeah, so it's the staff conditions and then the elevation stuff that we were talking about.
So I think that,
there-
to me, that covers from everybody else up here. Yeah, I think my comment on the metal is really an owner's choice, but I think you'd be cautious. I've just seen it happen too much. Okay. We got a motion and a second on the floor. Any comments further? Hearing none, call a vote. Michelle?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay,
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. So we're preliminary. You got another bite at the apple, Rita? Okay. All right, Mr. Kurt, what do we got coming up next?
Sure, this is another new construction. But not on Bay Street, so that's positive. Jeremy, if you just go to the building, that would be great. So this is at 1110 Green Street, proposed new house. It's in the T4HN district. It is currently a vacant lot, and looking at the Sanborn maps, didn't notice anything ever been on this lot for some time. So it's been a vacant lot. It's in the northwest quadrant. They're proposing a 1,542 square foot house, single story house, and then a 2-story ADU behind it. You can kind of see it there, the ADU, what that looks like, with the access from Green Street. And so I think as you read the packet, I'll let them give their presentation. Obviously, it went to an HTRC. We do have some comments, but the materials, they're going to have smooth fiber cement for their trim and siding, mahogany wood on the front door, and then a fiberglass on the side. I guess it was discussed about having vinyl windows, which was obviously a concern, a 5V metal roof, and then the front, and then you can see the front porch that they're proposing. There is actually a number of trees on the site, a 24-inch magnolia, a 16-inch sable pine, a 14, 15, and 21-inch laurel oak. The magnolia would be considered a landmark tree under our ordinance section 5.3.2, so that would have some concern. Obviously, there'd have to be some mitigation for that tree, or what we're recommending is maybe considering pushing the building back to save that tree. The surrounding area, which I don't know if you saw in your packet, but essentially it's made up of historic homes, and then there's 2 new homes on that block. And those homes are 1 to 2 stories tall. So this is a 1-story, obviously tall building. And again, it's a long, narrow lot that really hasn't had anything on it in some time. And the property to the west used to be, I guess, an old, a kind of a grocery store, or I don't know what, I think I've heard it called like a sweet shop or something of that sort, but now it's been converted into a residence. Anyway, next we look at 4.7, which is findings for infill for new development. There's 7 standards. That's location. Is there a relationship between the property and its historic context? I think I kind of discussed that. But this is also a narrow interior lot on the block. So, it makes sense that kind of a narrow 1-story house would be proposed for it. 2 is the design, that the feeling of the elements that these include building patterns, streetscape, site elements, building size, mass, and scale, spatial relationship, and specific architectural elements and details kind of make up that design. I think, we're trying to kind of match that surrounding area and the design of those houses on this block. 3, the setting, the physical environment that's evaluated on its context and the historical role the property played. So you're supposed to consider topography, vegetation, man-made features, and relationships between the existing structures and their surroundings. So again, there is that magnolia tree. There was the historic grocery store, but that's a 1-story, kind of right adjacent to the property. So I think staff feels that the 1-story home kind of fits in this infill lot, interior block lot. 4 materials, there are physical elements that make up the property in the district. I think there's some concern about the porch and the windows, and how maybe some conditions with that would potentially make it meet that standard. 5, workmanship. This is the physical evidence, the crafts or particular culture of the time period, or how essentially the new building would meet that historic fabric if that's around it. I think we feel like this meets the typical Beaufort architectural design and details, with some changes with the porch and the windows, et cetera. Feeling, this is this is the property's expression of the aesthetic or historic sense of a particular period of time. And this basically that the feeling of the surrounding structure should be considered and respected. And I think I've kind of covered that with everything. And then finally, association, this is direct link between any historic event, person, property, or building. Basically was something important on here in the past, and when you're looking at a new building, how do you honor that or that person? And again, we haven't really found any relevant history or persons related to this property. So the conditions that you have in your packet, and the other thing I should mention is the applicant did send this in as a final, but staff would kick this to a conceptual and preliminary. We don't think it's ready for a final, just because of, we don't have final details on a lot of the materials, and there's some issues that we wanted to raise that I think need to be resolved before you go to final. And one, that they provide a note on the total lot coverage. It is a long, kind of decent size, like 4,500 square foot lot. But we want to make sure it's not over 55% for pervious surface. 2, that they rework the front porch roof so it basically connects to the main house roof in a more appropriate manner. And I think you can ask Jeremy online what he feels that would be, because I'm not an architect. But 3, consider if the house can be shifted back on the lot a few feet or to the west to save that 24-inch magnolia tree. So again, that's on that northeast, right where Jeremy's got the cursor. So that would be a landmark tree under our code that would require mitigation. 4, that the applicant provide final cut sheets and a schedule for all exterior materials. 5, that they provide final colors on siding, side door, and roof. Those weren't provided. 6, we do not obviously support the use of vinyl windows on the main house or the accessory building as per the preservation manual, and we recommend all wood or fiberglass windows. 7, that they provide north arrows and label the building elevations with cardinal directions. And 8, which is kind of more of a planning concern is the garage, if you notice, is, the garage doors are oriented toward a alley that does not exist. So that alley is plotted, but there is nothing there essentially. And the city has no desire to, bring the alley up to any kind of standard for use. And so that's kind of a problem, is that, we have, essentially a garage that doesn't make a lot of functional sense. And so that's something to consider and to ask the applicant, because, right now you would assume they'd want to pull their cars into that, two-story ADU, but, practicalities of doing so are not there. So those are the conditions that staff would have before it goes to final, and I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Can I ask you a
Sure.
question? If the applicant wanted to create or to resurrect the existing alley at their own cost, is that an option?
It's an option, yeah. I think it's an option. But it would have to be not for just his lot. It would have to be, because it's an interior lot, it would have to go out to, a street essentially for it to be usable, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's turn it over to the applicant. Tell us what he's trying to do.
Hello, I'm Edward Simpson, and my wife and I are interested in building a single-family home as indicated. It's much simpler than the previous project, I think, fortunately, much lower. And the issues that were mentioned, I actually think I can pretty easily accommodate. Unfortunately, because of the timing of when I got those back and difficulties with the timing with my draftsman, I wasn't able to bring current plans that address those issues. But I can sort of list them one by one if I may, if that suits you, and just proceed with those concerns. So, and also I did meet with the historic board, and I think they've mentioned a few issues which I can also accommodate except for one. But anyway, I'll go over those if I may.
Sure, please do.
First and foremost, the draftsman made a mistake regarding the magnolia tree and the palm tree. I definitely want to save those trees. They're actually the only trees on the property worth comment. And as a result, I would want to move the house back 4 feet and westward towards Church Street 2 feet, which I think will be just enough to allow saving those 2 trees. I don't want to get too far back because then I'm going to be back further than the other houses on the street. But also I would like to, and it would be contrary to the staff comments, but I would like to shorten the front porch. I've actually built a house similar to this on a farm some years ago, and we only did a 6-foot front porch, which is actually more consistent with every other house on the block. They're all 6 feet or less. Most of them are about 5-foot porches, except for the 2 new homes that have been built on the block in the last several years. But all the others, all the historic homes are 5 to 6 foot porches. And I think for this scale, it's more appropriate. I felt like the board felt similarly, or the preservation board felt similarly. That would also help me in preserving that magnolia tree by getting it back a little bit. It also allows me to drop the roof of the porch a bit, which would make for a better transition to that gable end. Again, the draftsman, in a rush to meet the specs from the previous comments on getting to the HDRC meeting and getting ready for this, was sort of quick to throw those plans together, and it doesn't really show how that roof would look. I actually have a photograph of the house that I built some years ago. I can show you on my iPad afterwards if you want to see that, as well as some other photos of materials, including the front door. But in any case, regarding the coverage of the square footage, the footprint of the house and the garage are 1,650 square feet. The lot is 4,800 square feet, a little over 4,800 square feet. So that's well below the 2,400 square foot, 50% ratio. or 55% ratio. So I think we're well within that. Let's see, again, moving it west and back will solve that problem. I do not have cut sheets. I did bring a sample of the window I would like to use. It's not vinyl. It's an Anderson A series. It's a composite material with SDL mullions. I would not do black, and it would be white and a 2/2 mullion pattern. But that is the material and reflects what those Anderson 100 series windows look like. But again, it would be white with 2/2 pattern, which is consistent with the drawings that I think you have in your packet. Let's see, obviously we can provide directions and things on the next set of drawings that we get together. Regarding the alley and the garage, I've spoken with this city. I don't think there's any opposition to my using the alley. It is a public right of way. It's deeded as such. The surveyor, David Gasquey, has documented that for me. I don't think I really need to do anything to use it as an alley. It's already surveyed off. There's some markers. At most, I might put some gravel down at some point. I'm happy to do that and do any grading necessary. I think in the process of clearing the remaining trees on the property, I can easily do the grading and remove the trees on that. There's some small trees which are on the survey, preliminary site survey, also in the packet, that would need to be removed, but I'm happy to do that. Again, it is documented as an alley. The neighbors across the street, I've forgotten her name, Lynn, neighbor across the street who built a house some years ago, the White House, which has an accessory building with a garage. She told me that she had similar issues when they built their house, and that it was obviously a city right of way, and the city was able to clear the alley as required. Again, I'm not asking the city to get involved, but it is a public right of way. Also, she had a set of garage doors, which I took a photograph of and would happily use, which I think would be more appealing to the preservation foundation, so which I also have a photograph of. So I have samples of colors, roof material, the window, as well as photographs of what the front door and the garage doors would look like. Just in the event you wanted to give me a final today. That's really all I
Okay.
can think of offhand. Oh, I actually, if I may, I will comment on the historic foundations comments. We talked about the windows, which again, I've already mentioned, I'll be changing to this model if that's acceptable. The porch roof, as I said, if we can shorten the porch and drop the roof a little bit, it will, I think, resolve that transition to the gable end. And I should say that I came up with this design. I'm a frustrated architect, I guess, but I lived in Aiken for a number of years, and the equestrian grooms cottages there were very diminutive in scale, 16 feet wide, shotgun design. And that's kind of how I came up with this. And it's a very modest home, and the detailing, I think, should be modest, and the scale similarly. It's not by any means trying to be grand. It certainly wasn't the case in Aiken. It's a very, very simple, modest style. So, and the one issue that I would prefer not to comply with regard to the foundation is I had planned to do a metal chimney pipe coming out of the metal roof. I think they would like it if I did a brick chimney. Unfortunately, the cost is prohibitive, and I like the simplicity of the metal pipe, and I don't think that's terribly inconsistent with the historic property. We're up on with a wood stove and historic homes for a long time.
All right, sir. Thank you. We'll open a public comment and hear from the public, and then we'll get a chance to get in board discussion. I'll probably call you back up or something.
All right, if you want to see photos of those items, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Open it up to public, and it looks like Ms. Sunderland's up first.
Hey, Lisa Sandra, Historic Beaufort Foundation. Want to thank Mr. Simpson for taking the time to meet both with HTRC and with our Preservation Committee as well. And he mentioned a few of the items that we discussed with him on Friday at our Preservation Committee. Most importantly, we are very appreciative with his attention to the height, mass, and scale and being sympathetic with the surrounding properties and adjacent properties. So we thank him definitely for that. And with regard to the windows, there was one item on the rear elevation where the window is out of place. And I understand he's going to update that for his future submission where the window's dropped down too low and it just needs to be pulled up in the revised designs. With regard to the smokestack, we did have a lengthy discussion about that and about the consideration of using something such as a Rumford or similar style fireplace, but it was only a suggestion if you would like to go that direction. And then we did also have a question about the side exterior entry. And that, there you go, it's up right now. And while you can see it when you're looking down on the drawing, you can't see it on the elevation, but he plans to put a stoop where that door is. And I think it'd be good to be able to detail that a little bit better and give y'all more information on what that stoop would look like. With regard to the windows, this is the first time I'm seeing this, so I'm going to defer to y'all and to Jeremy and Kurt with regard to the type of window, since we hadn't had a chance to take a look at that one. And thank you also for the consideration of moving the building back to save those trees. But, oh, one final thing with regard to the garage dwelling building in the back. The garage doors we felt were not really in keeping with what you find within our historic district. So we suggested to him to ride through the historic district and the Northwest Quadrant and look at the different kinds of garage designs that are throughout that area to find something that's more in keeping. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sandra. Any other public comment? Mr. Smith?
Jeremiah Smith, 1107 West Street. I don't know that it's under your purview, but I just want to talk about the alley a little bit. I think that's an important part of the civic master plan. And I'd like to see more alleys continued and used. It may not show up as city right of way, but it's there and nobody's using it. I think it can be used.
Great.
Thanks.
I agree with you. Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Anyone online?
Nobody online, sir.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it up for board review, and obviously the applicant, our sheet says conceptual review. He's brought you more information here. I don't know if we could get the preliminary or what we have, but at least let's talk about conceptually how this building fits and what you like and don't like about it.
I conceptually like the design. I think it fits in within the neighborhood quite well. I think there seems to be some things that just need to be added to the packet, more or less. The one thing I didn't understand with the stove pipe is that when I look at the floor plan of the house, it looks like you have a masonry fireplace designed.
I do, and from the interior, it would look like a masonry fireplace, but from the exterior, you see a metal pipe. And again, I have a photograph of a house that I built similarly if you'd like to see it.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that. I guess I was imagining something that was more freestanding. But I guess that passes code and everything. Yeah, the pipe does.
I'd like to see it if
Okay.
you got a photograph.
Well, I would question, and again, I know we're not getting the codes, but it relates to the architect, to the aesthetics, how high the pipe has to be, because typical chimney height is 10 feet horizontal, 2 feet above, and that, the height that's drawn would not meet that. And now maybe that pipe is, is different, but.
In the home that I built, which was only 16 feet wide, so that plane would be slightly different because of the width of the building. you can see it's just below the ridge of the building in terms of height. Again, I have a photograph.
Let's.
Well, we
let's
need
put
to,
up-
for this building, not the one you built, because this has got to beat local code. He's talking about the height of the stovepipe on a chimney discharge has to be, there's a relationship to the ridge line of the building.
Right, and that's what I did here.
I only bring it up because, and again, we're not trying to deal with the codes, but if it has to meet that, which I think it does, the pipe is gonna be much taller than what's drawn.
It would,
The
I think,
exposure is
I
more.
think it has to be about 2 feet above anything in a 10-foot plane. And that's certainly what I would do on this building.
Yeah, I don't believe Bruce made mention of this, but, since this is not going to final, I believe, we'll, maybe a condition or recommendation, we'll make sure that Bruce looks at this before it goes to final in the next few
Okay.
days. Talk to Mr. Simpson.
Well, while we're on that, I would object to having that much pipe exposed. I think it just may seem a little bit too simplified. I understand what you're trying to do here, but just if it's limited, it's one thing, but if you've got 10 feet or 9 feet of pipe, it may warrant a chimney.
In the other house that I built to get the height required, it was 6 feet above the roof itself. For what that's worth, it would end up being probably about the same on this house to get that clearance.
But I think the point I'm hearing is, by Mr. Woods, is at some point, having a tubular pipe sticking out and no chimney is not appropriate in aesthetics. That's what I'm hearing. So there's a moment where, yeah, it looks like a wood burning stovepipe, okay? Or is it a fireplace? And so code will drive how high it gets, but we need to see that, finalize that for your final submission to understand really what it is. And we may tell you, no, you're gonna have to put a extended chimney box, whether it's masonry under wood or hardy, up to get that pipe high enough,
Cosmetic.
be cosmetic. And
Yeah.
that's, and maybe in the meantime, be looking at other homes in the neighborhood that fit and see if there's some connection to what you're trying to do. Because remember, we're trying to be compatible and associated to local architecture, not just create your own. Now, there is room for contemporary architecture, but you got to come here and prove it to us. So you want a glass building? Come try to sell us one. Let's see
Right.
what happens. All right.
I don't think I'll try that one. Would, again, I do have a photo, if that would help you visualize it.
Well, once you pass it down,
Yeah.
and this down, we can at least look at it, and we'll go ahead and look at that so we know what you're trying to do. In the meantime, he answered all the questions about what the staff, it sounded like it was okay, right?
I didn't know, I didn't.
No, I was pretty much finished.
The only, I would agree with you, sir. I think the depth of the porch, probably 6 feet is adequate for the scale of this home.
Now, did you design that 8 because of code or because your designer did it?
I changed the design to meet the,
You went to 8 to meet the code from HTRC discussion. Okay.
I did find the HDRC meeting really helpful. But that is one thing that I would prefer to go back to the original
Okay.
plan of a 6-foot porch, if possible. Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure we're understanding how the subjectivity of HRB and local architecture versus what the code did when we started looking at how to cookie cut architecture, right? So remember the code, the big book, gives you all these guidelines. If you went simply by that and didn't have to come here, we wouldn't be here.
Sure.
Not that we need something to do, it's just our job. Okay,
That's all
all right. What do you think about that?
I think it looks nice. It could be a lot taller. No, you did a great job.
Down there, what do we got?
I'm good with it. There are a couple of questions I had, but some of them were already addressed by HBF's concerned. The stoop on the window, that was one thing I saw. I'm not familiar with the Anderson A-Series windows. I mean, I saw it now, that composite material. Is that something, my understanding of the manual is wood or fiberglass. Now, I'm not opposed to considering new materials, but that would be something that would need to be worth discussing. I don't know that it needs to be hashed out now with the conceptual, but probably worth discussing at some point.
Well, we should discuss it now because the reality is it's an important and very expensive part of the operation. What I would tell you is that this building sits in the conservation neighborhood first. And because of that, there has been some leniency given to window choices over the years. Now, we prefer in historic structure repair renovation, putty glaze, all wood windows. Vinyl has been a taboo subject since beginning of time. And I don't know why, because I don't know that they're any worse off than a fiberglass. Because what we typically say in new construction elsewhere, all over the district, is aluminum wood clad window. Or vinyl, not vinyl, but fiberglass wood clad. What they're saying to you is the exterior has that layering, but the wood, there is wood in that window. I don't know if that's any better with today's wood, because what you end up with is a rotten interior of a window with a clad material in the exterior. That's what we see all the time. So I don't know why we keep going down that road, so I'm not sure if vinyl is absolute enemy, but right now, we're not accepting vinyl as a typical window placement. So when he says composite, I mean, it looked like aluminum clad to me from here, but it might be something else.
This is actually the 100 series,
Okay.
but it is, positive, which I think means
Some kind of plastic.
it has wood in it, it's wood and I guess some polymers and.
Yeah.
And it's fiber exterior.
But the point of my comment is that I'm not necessarily for or against that particular material, but I think it would be a new material, and so it is worth us all pontificating.
Sure, well, if he says composite and we never heard that, we need to know what that means. If he says it's aluminum clad wood window, we get it. If he says it's fiberglass, we get it. So that's the kind of dilemma. You brought us a window that we haven't seen anybody bring us before.
I went to, the contracting company and, they told me that it was Anderson's answer to the Marvin Elevate, which I've used before and I understand is acceptable, in the historic district, in previous projects. But that's all I know really beyond, composite, whatever euphemism that is. But there is supposed to be wood in it also. It's a,
I mean, I don't see a problem with the window. I think the board has to decide what that really means to us as we experience new material issues. So,
I am not the one that opposes new material on this board, so I just thought it's worth discussing.
all right, I have one comment that relates to fenestration of this building. And something we've kind of lost over time, and I've kind of, the monolithic slab construction for new construction is really not compatible to the historic district in practical sense. Now, we understand why it would be used, and it has been used. Good and bad results. One, we used to ask you to, and I'll let the board opine on their feelings of this. You used to make it appear to have some lift to it by adding in it, whether it's faux or just some bump out in pier structure, so that you could actually, and we've had builders made them do it, where they actually had to, recess a stem wall in their casting so that they actually, they could actually articulate it to look like hog fencing, so that we actually had some stucco piers. Because this looks, it just doesn't look like the time period, even though it's a long shotgun.
well, and on that subject, I wanted to mention, and Lisa had mentioned it, also the draftsman really didn't give a proper indication of the elevation of the foundation. And I had planned to do a 16-inch above grade, so you will get some height there, but, and I was gonna parge it with a buff colored mortar mix. But I understand what you're saying, if you need me to do a little bump out to look
I
like
mean, I think
pilings.
it would read better if it appeared to be a piered structure
Sure,
with infill,
sure.
rather than just this long monolithic slab.
Sure.
Yeah.
It looks like, the least expensive homes we can build if we're not careful.
Sure.
And that's okay. Economy is important, right? I don't want to ask you to make it costly, but those aesthetics were important in the Milner guidelines over the years for new construction. Many boards of the past have articulated that greatly over the years. So if my fellow board members aren't, are concerned or would like to see that, I'd like to see that for final, have some better idea of what the level, the relationship to the earth and the grade is.
I think it's an excellent thing to
Yeah.
point out.
Well, if I may, but to articulate the foundation, we do that, but you're gonna need to be at least 30 inches above grade to be able to pull it off to make it worthwhile. If you have such a minimal amount from the band board to the ground line, you're wasting a lot of effort that you're never gonna see.
Yeah, I agree. Landscaping changes all that too.
Landscaping, right? So if you want to articulate the base, again, that's fine. And it does read more as an infill, but you really need to have at least 30 inches of, finished floor elevation above grade to make that worthwhile, I think.
Right. And it's not gonna be that high, even with,
I had not planned to do that. It would not be practical with the monolithic slab to raise it that much. I think I would, and even now, I would consider shifting to piers with whatever you deem appropriate between the piers, which would be a wooden floor system instead of the slab. I just know dealing with this environment and
Yeah, I don't,
or in wood, I like concrete, for that reason, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
I think if you could get, if you had 10 inches of elevation above grade and landscape grade, not, prior to landscape, you could get hog fencing to read appropriately. But what, if you're a board and a half, it doesn't, like Mr. Wood
Yeah,
said.
no, I was thinking, 16 inches above.
That would give you
finished
enough room,
grade.
I think, to articulate the spacing of a typical 8 to 10 foot pier section. A little bit more cost for you, and I don't like doing that to an applicant, but I think that it's important that it does read as, the fenestration reads as kind of typical Beaufort build, and the
Mhm.
6 foot porch I'm okay with. I just thought the shotgun house, it typically wouldn't be a monolithic slab, shotgun house in Beaufort. We never would have seen one of those.
But Mr. Chairman, if you have that, what's the idea of the infill between the piers?
It just,
Typically, you'd have
it
like-
doesn't, I don't necessarily, for me personally, I think infill shadow lines on the piers is enough. I don't necessarily think you need the hog fencing to be fake hog fencing in there. We've seen that done.
What
and it-
hot
It'd just be there's two ways to do
horizontal
it.
slab.
horizontal boards?
Horizontal plank would be the best approach. I don't like lattice, and a lot of people use
Yeah,
lattice. It
Yeah,
just
no, I
doesn't
agree.
last.
I agree, yeah.
To your point, it's faux.
Mhm.
The only thing I'm looking for is shadow lines, not necessarily.
Right, right. Where you would do a bump out for the pillar or.
Yeah, you just have to, when you cast it, you have to offset a little bit to create that shadow line. When they they stuck around it and go down the line, it would look like somebody took a house and stuccoed over the brick piers and infill with CMU, which
I
they
might
did.
need you on site.
You might.
I have to recuse myself if I come down. Anyway, those are some thoughts for final. So what does the board want to do? I think he's on a good track here.
Mike, this is Jeremy. Can I interject one little thing real quick?
Yes, sir.
So speaking about what y'all were just talking about, the first floor and elevation, I think the point that we need to make is under 2.6.2 point C, specific to T4 zones. This is where if the applicant, as you kind of study this, the finished ground floor height for residential structures shall be elevated a minimum of 2 feet above the average adjacent sidewalk grade or adjacent street grade where no sidewalk is present. So I think when you're studying with your draftsperson how to elevate this up, keep that in mind, 2 feet out to the street or that sidewalk. That will give you some guidance, which will help with that appearance.
Thank you. I think the 16 inches above ground grade will be easily the 24 inches from the street pretty
Mhm.
easily, but that's certainly will verify that.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Do you still want to see photos or?
I want to see it. You seem to be proud of it. Let me see
Well,
it.
I'm not especially, but I just thought it would help you visualize some of the stuff so I can now figure out how to find it.
While he's bringing that up, we're gonna have to get a motion on the table here in a minute.
Are we doing conceptual only or conceptual?
Yeah.
and preliminary?
Unless y'all want to go preliminary. That doesn't look, that's the very same design. It's a little bit longer. Oh, it's much taller. So we have a project up here for conceptual. Look, if you come back with all the details, we ask staff to put it on for final. If you have everything, you'll get final on the next read.
Correct.
All right, if we have to go through more discussion, you might end up with a preliminary next time and have to come back third time. We're trying not to get you to come back 3 times.
Right.
Okay, good. All right.
Before we make a motion, can I ask, Jeremy, are you familiar with this Anderson window that's been put in front of us?
Yes, that as the applicant stated, the Anderson 100 series is kind of directly related to the Marvin Elevate. They call it a Fibrex material. It is a fiberglass product that does have a little bit of wood fiber in it for strength, but but that's basically what it is.
And that seems like something that you would not be opposed to. If they had brought it here originally, you would not have been opposed to it?
I would not have been opposed to it, no. I think it would be much like the Marvin Elevates we've seen before.
All right, board, can I get a motion from someone?
I'll make a motion
Your motion, let's do it.
to give conceptual approval with the staff conditions, and then I would add the conditions that they restudy the chimney pipe, restudy the monolithic slab to see if the height of it lends itself to being articulated, as Mr. Sutton noted, and then just some of the small adjustments. For example, the rear elevation window needs to come up just on the drawing, and some of those fixes.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Any further debate, discussion? Hearing none, we'll start.
Aye.
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 All right. So that means you have,
Yes.
bring it back with everything you got and see if you can get final.
Just like the first complicated, how he brought back all those conditions and he mentioned how they, that if you did something like that, we can do another TRC or you could just send it straight, we can make some comments to you and then put it to the board. It's up to you.
Whatever works.
It's at your discretion.
Next meeting, so I would love to get it presented somehow, but I don't know if I need to.
You can do it online or you need to have an agent for you, one of the two.
Yeah, you'll have to have a representative here in order for us to hear.
It has to be here or they'll not hear it.
All right, let's move on to the next item, daylight burning. It is item C, 902 Harrington Street, new construction. Mr.
Sure.
Smith.
So this is another new home that's being proposed, also in the northwest quadrant. This is also a T4HN district. You see it on your screen. And it also is a similar sized lot, an interior lot that's, roughly the same size, about 4,600 square feet lot size. The difference in this home being is that, as you can see on the streetscape on your screen, is that most of the homes around it are 2 stories and one instead of 1 story. So this is they're proposing a 2-story home at 902 Harrington Street with also an ADU. That's much smaller, so a 1-story ADU of 240 square feet with a carport. So this is an 1,800 square foot home, just so everybody's aware as well. This is coming to a final approval. I guess staff felt like they've provided all the final details and comments to go to an HTRC. And I think staff feels like it's ready for a final approval with the very minimal conditions. You can see on the exterior materials that, it's a fiber cement, that Charleston white, wood doors with a wood stain, the Marvin Elevate that we were just talking about with spacer bars and single divided light, wood shutters, and I don't even know what that color is. So one of you might, I can't even say it. Asphalt shingle roof, that's slate gray, wood railings that are Charleston white, and a kind of a wood porch. It's 10 foot in depth, raised, and it has 4 wood columns, also painted Charleston white. So I've added this tree section, and I think I'm going to add a floodplain section from now on. So you can say, with the elevation on everything. So I'll add that on the next staff report. So added the materials and the tree removal. So in this case, there's a 16 and 19 inch pecan, a 19-inch laurel oak, and about 4 sugar berries, all under 12-inch DBH. So none of those trees are protected trees. Pecans and laurel oaks only become specimen or landmark over 24 inches. Otherwise, they're not protected. They just require a simple tree removal permit and $10 fee to cut them down. So there is no protected trees that will be impacted with this site. It is in the northwest quadrant. The homes on the block are made up of historic homes, and there's only 1 new home that are 1 to 2 stories tall. You see the streetscape, so most of the the houses are 2 stories and the houses adjacent are 2 stories with a vacant lot. So this would kind of meet them. I won't read all of the 4.7.2 because you heard that last time, but essentially what it means is, as the chairman was stating, it's, are the materials, the siding, and, like the mass and the scale, all in keeping with the historic context of the area and the block? And, was there anything really of substantial historic importance that should be honored on with this lot? And I think when we're looking at these 7 things, this was an interior lot that at least there hasn't been anything on it in many decades that I can find. So there's no major structure on the lot, really doesn't have any important historical interest that I can tell from any important person either. And then the design, the setting, et cetera. So there's 2 stories, as were mentioned, so it's meeting that. And I think we feel like the materials that have been provided and on the house are kind of in keeping with the materials found in the surrounding area. So I think we feel like this would meet all of those standards for section 4.7.2. And I think just that the 5 conditions or 6 conditions, I should say, are somewhat minor and just clarifications that I think staff feels like can be handled in a staff nature, and we'll send to both Bruce and to Jeremy and Maria to clarify before we final the permit. But those are about the windows that provided. Just to clarify the note with the SDL and the spacer bars on the cut sheet, just that they note that all cementitious trim, eaves, and fascia must be smooth, that they provide cut sheets for any decorative exterior lights and exterior fans. So these are, again, all really minor. I think they've already provided the colors and materials, but again, just to clarify if there's any changes with that, provide typical window details to illustrate the casings and projecting sill, and to provide a north arrow on all floor plans and label elevation drawings with cardinal directions. So I think staff feels those are all minor, and Jeremy, can feel free to step in if there's anything else you have there. So, and that's about it.
Great, thank you very much. We'll hear from the applicant, Mr. Smith, who is no stranger to this meeting agenda. Mr. Smith, for the public record, was the prior chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeremiah Smith with Allison Ramsey Architects. I'm happy to go over these or not. I know time is ticking along. We're happy to comply with all 6 of those conditions. I have lighting cut sheets if you'd like to see it, or I can just make sure it's in to staff. We are going to go with Colby Forgent, which I think is real similar to the Marvin Elevate. But I'll make sure that's all clear and in the notes. Answer any questions though, if I need to. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, open it up to public comment. Ms. Thunderla from HBF.
Hi, last item on the agenda. Lisa Sunderla, Historic Beaufort Foundation. Jeremiah wasn't able to join us at the Preservation Committee meeting on Friday, but he did send some additional photographs to us, which actually changed the direction of comments that I'm going to make today. Thank you, Jeremiah. We had originally looked at the building, which first, let me say, from a mass and scale perspective, we feel that they have taken the area into consideration. There is a newer structure, category corner to it across the street that is also 2 stories, same height. I think this fits well within that neighborhood block front, and so did our preservation committee. So thank you for that. We had a few design suggestions, one with regard to the shutters. The committee had said to use paneled, 1 or 2 panel for the shutters. But Mr. Smith sent over some photographs to me showing that some precedent throughout the historic district for using the vertical shutters that he was using. So I think we're comfortable either way, if he chooses to go with paneled or if he chooses to go with that. With regard to the windows, we felt on the rear elevation, and I think this is the location of a restroom, that there needed to be an additional window to balance out the rear elevation. So we didn't discuss that, but that was something that the committee wanted to just see more symmetry with regard to that. For the porch railing, the committee's initial suggestion was to use a balustrade that was more typical throughout the district. Again, Mr. Smith sent me some photographs now, which do show that treatment on an older structure. And so we're comfortable either way, whichever y'all decide with that. And the chimney, it was our understanding initially that it was going to be EIFS on the exterior chimney, but it is going to be masonry with stucco. So we are supportive of that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Any other public comment? Anybody online like to find?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it up to the board for review. Yeah, how are you guys looking at this thing? We're asking for a final now, so remember, you gotta look at it with all pieces completed.
My overall feeling, if they meet all the requirements, I think it's a great project.
I've been thinking about it. I think it's a great looking building. I have a personal concern about that buildings are getting bigger and bigger over time. Everybody wants large footprints. But that's practical living today, so I'm happy to hear HBF agrees with the mass and scale. I'm supportive of that.
What is acanthus again?
What?
Acanthus? It's a color? Did I even say that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a plant, but it's just the name of the Sherwin-Williams color.
Blue, green, white? Yeah.
It should be in your packet, maybe the last sheet.
Yeah,
Did I miss that? Looks like a light green.
yeah.
I'm slightly colorblind, so.
Yeah, I can't see what,
Are
color-
you-
the shutters look like green. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, the top ones.
Are those natural wood doors? Is that what you're intending to do? Polyurethane?
Yeah, some kind of stain, maybe a little darker than that, I would think, but
What's, yeah, okay. I mean, I always think the practical side is like wooden doors in sunshine and Beaufort climate, they'll be peeling and gray in about a year.
true. This does face east, so it'll be a little better than facing west, but
I think it's a great look.
We had some success with the product, PPG ProLux. They make a wood finish that, even in the sun has, at least some of the stuff we've done has held up pretty well. So might be worth looking into. PPG ProLux. I think Spectrum has it. We had some folks that we reached out to in Charleston to ask for some good wood finishes, and that seems to have worked well.
I find my clients tend to redo their doors about once every 10 to 12 years, something like that.
I have to do mine every 5. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
due now,
I guess how
I
much
can
shade
look.
you get.
mahogany. Yeah.
Anyway, so something to look into.
Mr. Smith, I have a question to you on the, which I'm glad that, you did your homework and presented photos showing that we do have, a diversity of architectural styles that often aren't spoke to, but the balustrades versus the X framing in the pockets. I know there's buildings like that because I've remodeled them like that, and this is exactly one of them. Yeah, that's one.
Yeah. I kind of like.
it's a little different. That's just right by my house on West Street, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it also just kind of adds variety and makes
Yeah.
the district stronger than just all the same.
I agree.
Don't know what the other pictures are showing here, but that's nice.
It's just showing those panel shutters.
Oh, the shuttle, that's what you're looking for. Okay.
Panel versus the vertical.
I'm sorry, vertical
Cause, right,
board shutters rather than paneled or louvered, which you see a lot of.
No, they're,
So these would have the bars in the back that you would see if it was closed.
it's a much more practical shutter for our climate. in Charleston typically use them on the upper floors and they use, or on the lower floors, and they use louvers on the top, but the louvers in our climate just don't last. So
Yeah. They fall out.
Fall out quickly. So this is a great app.
Paid actors, you think?
You don't think
I
there's a
think it's
code-
him working.
any code compliance issues with those type of balustrades in the?
It's less,
We'll probably need to do a hardware cloth and we'll show a detail for that, like a 4x4 behind it.
you don't need it unless it's over 30 inches above finished grade.
Well, that's true too, yeah.
It's great.
We should be under 30 inches.
29 and.
I like the look, and we've had some, I've had to prove that we've had them before like this, and I think it's a good to have that juxtaposition, you know, that everything's not the same type of balustrade all over town.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that look, and I think it's a good looking project, so I don't have any issue. He's met all the staff requirements. Any other
It's,
comments?
Before we let you, if you look at the foundation on this house, it's the same as, or similar to the other. Again, I think that we don't need to sort of impose that pier panel concept on this house. Certainly, we haven't even discussed it. And the last one, I think, again, you just lose it because you don't have enough, you know, it doesn't create an impact. What you do see here, though, which what Jeremiah's done, is you see that under the porch columns.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you address the columns correctly, I think that's the, you know, the
Yes.
priority, if you will.
And that would play into the front porch on the other project.
And you can limit it to that, and I was on Reviewers Oldfield for 17 years, and we did that, we would require under porch, and during, you know, under porch columns, you'd have that pier or implied pier, but at the base of the foundation, if it's, you know, going to be buried in landscaping for the most part, you don't get the bang for the buck. Just a point
Is
of
this a slab or is it gonna have a crawl space?
bracelet.
It will definitely have a slab.
I think this is an elevated slab, isn't it?
You know, they slide.
didn't-
Yeah.
That's a good point. I'm learning some things from you up here, so I appreciate
So
it.
maybe make a motion.
I think.
I did the last two, so somebody else has to do it.
I'll move to give final approval with any comments has been addressed.
I'll second that motion.
So it's a motion to accept for final
Final.
with staff comments
Any,
noted,
these minor comments have been addressed.
and they've been addressed, okay? Second there. Any other debate? Questions? Michelle, would you vote first?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Then we go to staff present the last project.
All right. I think we'll go to the pictures on this one again, Jeremy, just because those tell the story here more than anything. Last year, you approved a kind of a open bar concept, a second story kind of open bar concept at this location. I think the applicant is proposing something different to take the place of that, or a temporary solution. I'm sure you can ask him about that. So this would be essentially a replacement of that approval, and in the sense that it is still permanent, and he's requesting a pergola kind of approval and tabletops with other improvements at this area. So this is this is at 301 Carteret Street. It's essentially this common area that, let's just put on the screen, that I think everyone that walks, you know, it's pretty visible location for Beaufort, but it's already been kind of delineated by brick pavers. So if you've been by there, the big brick paver, maybe the pictures there, Jeremy, that would be, if you have those.
There's later, there's a picture.
Yeah, if you can find the picture, but
Yep.
this is a 581 square foot area, but the brick paver area, so there's the first area, which is 19 by 27 feet. And so you can see it, there you go. And so right now, that's how it exists. And then there's also a 4 by 17, although I think from going out there, it may be 3.5 or 3 feet, but you know, I guess we'd have to measure that exactly. But that's a 3.5 by 17 or 4 by 17 foot area. Both of these are, you know, one in the corner of Port Republic. So this is a continuous kind of area that was made up as parking. To be kind of a exterior space for, I suppose, kind of an outdoor space for the guests of the hotel. So they're proposing to build a 500, basically a pergola and area, seating area in this kind of, like, that you can see space that's kind of under the brick there. That's right off of the sidewalk. So that's what you're looking at today. The material, so the pergola would be metal 10 feet high, and I think there you go, he has it on the screen with 3x3 beams and in that 19 by 27 foot area. So those would be permanent structures that you see there. And then there'd be also a pergola that's 9 feet high with that's be a 9, not an inch high, I'm sorry about that. And then a 4 by 17 foot, on that 4 by 17 foot area next to the handicap space. So you can see them there. So it's slightly lower, but it's also a pergola that would be over that space. There would be a bar top that's wood laid over those existing kind of, I guess, columns or bollards, whatever you want to call them, along Carteret Street. I did send an email that the applicant wanted to make sure that this would not be a bar, right? This would be a countertop area. No one could order from it. It would be more for, I think, just setting down, things for anybody using the area. So again, nothing would be ordered or served there. It would be just kind of a seating, kind of a lounge area. So I just want to make clear about that. So lighting would be uplit LED at the pergola base. There was a kind of a detail on that in one of the sheets that's in your packet, and Jeremy will probably get to that. The roof of the pergola, so the pergola would have basically like kind of a fabric that would go over top of it. I think we had some concerns about, that fabric, but they've provided the cut sheet the applicant has for everybody to see. And then there would be 4x6 planters with screens and then climbing plants along the parking area of the project. So the area of that brick area that's along the parking spaces would have, and then in the 19 by 27 foot area would have those planters that would provide that buffer with the climbing plants. So that's what they're proposing. It's a little difficult to describe and a lot easier to kind of show on the screen. Again, kind of a seating area. Looking at this, I guess staff would recommend either tabling it for more information on details, or and then considering at a later meeting, or I think we would recommend or denying the plan. So if you're to table it, there's 2 conditions. So applicant must provide an accurate site plan in the area around the proposed improvements. This is important to show the dimensions of the ADA space and the associated access aisle. So ADA spaces have to have that van accessible access that makes them bigger. Also the bar top extension. And so there's some concern that we would have, that you can see the hatching there, that having people in that space would, without any kind of barrier, would, could impact that handicap space, and people could be leaning on cars, or it could be impeded, which is, obviously a problem that we would want to see something, a little more information and how that's going to be addressed, and also a little better dimensions on that. Also that they provide more detailed information on the structure of the pergola. It doesn't seem to be adequate to resist wind uplift, both to our architect and the building official. And also the fabric shades would not meet really the wind load for the building code. So those are issues that, why we think that it could be considered as a tabled. If you go the conceptual route and you don't table it, you hear a conceptual, I think we believe that it, right now with what's submitted, that we would recommend denying the request, that we don't feel it's appropriate for the location on site. And it doesn't really work very well with the ADA space, which, we have to make sure that's always accessible. And it appears very temporary in nature. And I think that's, I think you've talked about looking at that historic context, and certainly I think we're not trying to to be to the detriment of the owner who's, you know, trying to create a pretty cool space for his guests. But, you know, this becomes somewhat permanent when you put the pergola and these improvements out there. The way it exists now, you know, I don't think it has that permanent impact that it might have on the historic area, because this is all very modern, and, you know, we're in a historic district. So with that, I will stop and turn it over to the applicant.
Great. All right, we'll hear from the applicant now. Who's representing? No, there he is.
Hi there, I'm Matt McElhinney. I'm the City Loft Hotel. My wife Laura and I own the hotel. A couple of things. Well, first, let me say I've been before you all many times, but this is my solo endeavor. So I imagine there's some holes to fill, but I think I've got the information. I hope so that Kurt is seeking to help you all make decisions, at least at a conceptual level. I'll just tell you again, this is about a 580 square foot pergola that is in fact intended to be more of a permanent structure. I understand the concerns with respect to the ADA spaces. I think I can show you where I know I can show you where I've photographed, extended the ADA space, and I meet those requirements in terms of 196 inches in width for both the parking space and the offloading ramp. As to folks that might lean against cars, we don't run a flop house operation. We're not interested in people hanging out to lean against cars. You lean against someone's cars, we're going to talk to you about it. That said, that particular space that is adjacent to the actual bar top area, it is the offloading area. All ADA vans, they all offload from the right-hand side, is my understanding. So that would be, you know, empty. It wouldn't be where the car typically would be, because they would need to open up that side to offload. That said, we don't intend to have people hanging out in that space as it relates to just, you know, occupying it and obstructing anyone from using it. It is about 4 feet wide on the bricked area. I can tell you and show you now that I've gone out, and we did end up with the patio itself. When it was bricked, it ate up about 3 feet of that parking space. And so we went ahead and we adjusted for that. And I have a shot that I can show you. I'll leave with staff, can't locate it right now, that shows you that we have in fact created the blue lines, which make for the extension of what was lost. Because when we opened, of course, we had to have the dimensions correct just to get that space. And here's what's I've just got
Just one, that's fine.
to show you, but that doesn't impede on my curb cut. It takes it back to meet all ADA requirements, the exact dimensions that are necessary. So I hope that we've overcome that. I did want to speak to.
Can we pass that around?
Certainly.
Thanks.
Kurt was very fair in asking me several times about the bar top areas. Now, I've had out on that property over the years, bar tops across those columns that you see now. I don't know if you all may or may not have seen them in the past, but they've been there. They're in fact the ones that are going to go back, maybe extending them a little bit more. And the question was asked by email, Kurt, that no drinks would be ordered there. This is not intended to be an outdoor bar where preparation of drinks is made, but to be clear, I'm doing this not just for the hotel, but the general public. My alcohol and beverage license will permit me anywhere on 301 Carteret Street to serve alcohol. This is for alcohol, this is for coffee, this is for muffins, this is for whatever you want to do, sitting, occupying that space, or standing on our property. So I did want to make that clear. And I think when I answered that question, Kurt, when you emailed me, in all fairness, I'm riding along in the car and I thought, I think what he's driving at is, and I actually tried to call you twice, is that it's not the preparation of any bar type atmosphere where it would affect that ADA people. I could see that, people coming around and blocking that. That's intended. I didn't put any chairs there in any of the 3Ds because I didn't want to show it as it could be fluid, people standing, moving around on that brick area, but it's about 4 feet wide. So the ADA is now, it's back in compliance. I did want to clarify the bar tops, they are mahogany. I don't think I gave you all that before, but I have that and I'll leave photographs of those as well as some other cut sheets. As it relates to the site plan and the exact location of what I'm trying to do, again, this is my first go at it as from a solo perspective. Usually I've got a Rob Montgomery or somebody with me, but that said, you can see, I believe I provided an as-built survey with the dimensions highlighted, and this is essentially, not essentially, just factually, where this pergola will rest over the top of. It does not hang over the portions of the parking lot. It does not hang over portions of the sidewalk. It follows the perimeter of what I've outlined here and provided to you all. So that is the exact location in the southwest corner, about 581 square feet approximately, where this will reside. I think that there was a question again as to the ADA parking space. I hope I've alleviated some of those concerns. The dimensions of the structure, I think, again, speaking about it as it relates to the perimeter, that's how it falls. This is designed to be, this is a retractable manual canvas pergola that is connected on wires. These are wires and essentially a glorified, if you will, shower that you might have where you would run it on your wires. But these are very much so, and I can tell you from the price points that they're intended for commercial use, high winds. They being most of these companies don't engineer the actual beams themselves, the posts themselves. They ask that you do it. And I think that they ask that you do it so that you get it exactly right. They give you the canopy system and the wires. So I'll have these built as it stands now. I've got them at 3-inch by 3-inch tubing for steel. I can show you all also a profile of how those would be set as to not be compromised by the wind. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm doing this is, well, several reasons, but from a architectural standpoint, I have a mid-century modern building. I feel like this fits far more than umbrellas that are constantly a problem for us, for wind, for damage, for potential flying out into the street. It's not something that I really want to go with. So I see this as something that is far more sturdy as it relates to wind. And because you build these yourself, and often they don't really say, if you order this system, it's wind rated at X. But I can tell you that I've read that most of these systems have survived an 80 mile an hour type winds, up to 80 mile an hour. You can see that the canvas is essentially, it's not as if it were an umbrella capturing the wind. It's parallel to the ground more, sort of bellowing, and that helps us with wind. They will be manually retractable on, I think, 4 different panels so that we can enjoy the sun and we can get away from the sun. They're not designed to have it rainproof by any means, but they are fire rated. And I think it was mentioned earlier in something else about the fire ratings. I'm very concerned about that. I obviously have a huge investment at my hotel. I'm not interested in having problems there. So they'll be fire rated as appropriate for code, of course. And Pfeiffer Techs, I think Overs Umbrella typically has that as I have read. So the supports themselves go into Sacrete down into the ground about 2 feet 6 inches is what we're proposing. they'll drop down. I'll have to chisel away some of the patio, the brick that I have, drop them down in there 2 feet 6 inches, fill them with a Sacrete, re-brick back over that spot. But we believe that that's provides substantial girth to what we're attempting to avoid, which is anyone leaning, bumping, hitting it hard. They should remain uncompromised. There were questions on lighting. I do have some cut sheets that I can leave. I'm not quite able to articulate the exact lighting, as I'm not a lighting expert, but I've tried to educate myself enough to understand that what I want to do is some uplighting with kind of warmth. 3,000 kelvins is what I've read is sort of the warm light. I have some little kind of lanterns that my wife has picked out that she thinks would sit nicely on the tables, or perhaps even being hung in a place or two that create this warm light. I don't want anything that resembles something that one might think we're an airport or otherwise. This is not a bright lights, big city program I'm running. These will likely something similar. These are solar powered uplighting, about 7 to 8 inches that come out of the ground. Might have those around the palmetto tree that I have, just to uplight that, kind of to get that shadowing effect that I think would make a nice look on the property itself. Those were the questions that came back from HTRC, and then there were a little bit more, I think, beefed up questions that came back then from the staff. But I think that they likely fell into what I've talked about. Don't want to impede the ADA space. I hope that I've given you enough confidence that it's just not to appear as a temporary structure on the site. And I wanted to speak a little bit, if I could, about the landscaping. Essentially, what I want to do is we have 8 planter boxes, and the planter boxes are 32 inches long, about 16 inches high, 10 inches wide, and we're going to build inside of, they have 7-inch openings when you're looking down at the top of them, and we're going to build vertical walls there that of wood. It might be some pine, might be some sort of varied kind of architectural to give us a little shadowing, but intended to have greenery woven into them so that we can have a nice, it breathes a little bit, gives us a little bit of privacy. I think they were listed as 4 feet high on the sides and 6 feet in the back. They're actually going to be more like 7 feet in the back. I want to really have it higher in the back. They come out on the sides, not quite to fulfill the entire perimeter of this property. I want it open more on Carteret, closed more in the rear from the parking lot. Did put the pergola at 9 feet, the smaller one, or I'm sorry, what would be the smaller in width, longer in a run, and then 10 foot on the larger one, as to just create some definition, so it did not look as if it were one monolithic kind of slab. That is, it's about all I've got.
All right. Sold it. Let's go ahead and open up the public comment, and then we'll have a decision to make up here based on staff's comments and questions, and or keep moving. So, thank you, Matt.
Yes.
Come on up, Ms. Sunderland.
You just love being up there, I know. That's all right. This is the last one. For some reason, I thought the last one was the last one. Save the best
I
for
thought
last.
you were leaving early.
I do. Geez, my mind, not with it. Lisa Sunderland, Historic Beaufort Foundation. We did have an opportunity with our Preservation Committee to meet with Matt on Friday. And the two key questions that he was just addressing now, the ADA parking and also the stability of the structure itself, were a part of a big discussion during our meeting. He did allay some of the concerns about the stability of the structure. It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that these are not going to be clamped on top of the surface. They're actually driven in. Yeah, how far down?
2 feet 6 inches.
Okay, so they're driven in 2 feet 6 inches, so they're gonna be, pretty sturdy as far as that's concerned. We do share city staff's concerns about the ADA requirements. Obviously, I think this would be a much more successful project if the ADA space and drop off was not right smack, in the middle of it. No question about that. So I think that's something that really needs to kind of be looked at from a design perspective. You've got two options: one, keeping it as he's done it now with sort of that L shape or 7 shape, or just sticking with what he's got in the corner already. Those are essentially your options unless he can move that ADA space to another part of his property, but I assume that impacts his overall parking requirement for that building. So the concern that came from the committee sort of specifically, and I need to understand, what's the ADA width? Is it 3 foot or 5 foot for a sidewalk area or an area to traverse? Yeah, because you were saying 4 foot?
Well,
Or-
forgive me, but I'm not sure what the issue is. There are requirements, as I understand it, for the length, 18 feet, and both a parking space and an all-floating space.
Oh, I'm not talking about the space. I'm talking about your paved area. That's on the side where the bar is.
Yes,
What the width of that is.
that's about 4 feet, but I don't think that's required. I think once they come out, you can immediately go onto the sidewalk. You just come out and you go onto the sidewalk and then.
Private area and the parking space itself, so yeah, I mean, it's not a required area.
Well, look, generally, just sort of record, generally, it's a public comment period. Ms. Sundry, you get a chance to opine. We don't have to get a debate
Yeah,
about.
They're having a.
the
Okay, we don't need, don't need to get into all this, yeah.
Just state what you
Sorry,
gotta
but that was
say.
just a question. That was just a question with regard to it. The concern I think that our committee did have, and not at the fault of what, Matt's trying to do, but just human nature, is folks on the public sidewalk leaning over on the counter. And, how is that stopped from happening? And it might be raising the counter on the side with some sort of a lip or something that goes up. I don't know. But that was one question. And then the other recommendation that they did offer was, rather than to go with a planting for the panels, to instead do a decorative panel, even like the metal panels that were being considered for the previous project that he was going to be doing on that property, but just something that can be easily maintained, because over time, that's going to become a lot of work with that many panels and maintaining greenery on it. But overall, I think that the committee was supportive of the concept and supportive of the direction. They just felt that some of those points needed to be fleshed out a little bit more.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? Do we have any virtual comment?
No, sir.
Okay, let's close public comment and bring it up to the board. We have some staff recommendations, and then we've heard the presentation from the applicant. And so we have some choices to make. Anybody has anything particular related to this that would stop us from opining on it? Let's hear it now. If not, we'll dig in a little bit.
Well, I think we need to address the staff recommended tabling, so if we can get beyond that, we'll have a conversation, right? But if we're gonna follow the staff's recommendation, it's over.
Yeah, well, tabling doesn't help us all, or doesn't help the applicant.
I agree, but I think we need to address that.
But here's the irony of all this. Conceptual, if you give him conceptual, you tell him what he's doing, is heading in the right direction, but you're not giving them permission to do anything. And all these questions could be answered at the next run. So look, if you're just opposed to having this particular owner use this corner like he wants to use it, then we table it and we let staff keep beating it up. If we believe in concept, and we've worked with this applicant on other larger scale project on that corner, so obviously there's a need. So I'm willing to opine and,
As well.
I agree.
at least on the conceptual
I
level.
like to have a conversation. I think this.
I would gladly opine. I would gladly opine.
I immediately came up with like a possible solution is just to make one square box and not have that extended
Exactly.
area. I mean, it would fit in more with a mid-century modern. It would, I mean, I can't speak about the structural elements of it, but I think what you would lose is not so significant. I think being in the square space would be far more enjoyable
Is it,
than being right up against the street anyway.
is it because of the 8 comments or is it because of the?
I just think it would be more successful altogether because I think it would actually be a better interpretation of a mid-century, simpler.
Not so far over towards the office, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I just think that skinny bit is not as aesthetically pleasing.
There's aesthetics of.
I'm probably speaking more in aesthetics, but I don't, honestly, I believe Matt about the structural elements. But I don't know anything. I mean, they're saying, they're in our packet, they're concerned about.
Well, there's not enough information to understand what structurally at all what's happening. See, so there's not even a footer design, so that's at a conceptual level, we're saying, okay, you can put a box on the corner with shade over it and landscaping. That's conceptual. Now, come back and tell us what the box is gonna look like if you wanna get past that point.
Well, I think the applicant did state the 3-inch square, but is it? is
Yeah, but
it-
he's making that up
is
because
it
he don't know what he's
aluminum?
using yet.
Is it aluminum? You know, tubular aluminum?
Man.
Or is it steel?
Well, what I'm saying is, look, typically when we build something, we have to have a plan. You can't just say, I'm gonna put this up at a commercial venue. So you'd have a stamp set of drawings from an engineer that shows you what we're at. We don't have that. We're not that level. Okay? We're at conceptual saying you can have a shade area on the corner of your property and to me, you're looking like trying to do a minimalist look, which is also less expensive and works. So I've seen these shade designs in other applications and they do the function you're trying to do. So I don't have a problem with that. That wavy bellowing top that collapses, fine. You know, when it water loads, you collapse it or whatever. Anyway, but I think I'm okay with a conceptual idea that he wants to use that corner for something. I just know he's got a long way to go to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And not terribly long way, just the comments, just like the planter. I have a hard time growing in this sun, a lot of stuff to get the elevation off. So really the question I have is like, are we using synthetic plants? Are we gonna use real plants? Is there some idea what might really work? Or would you be open to doing maybe a combination of a solid panel and then
That is what I would like to do is, so actually, these are wood within these planters of 8 planters. They're vertical, there's wood that comes out of these. They're not just, and there's some greenery woven in. I want it to be able to breathe. I don't want a continuous wall. I don't want people trapped in this catcher's mitt where there's a wall. So that's in part, and I don't think something looks like lattice kind of achieves the objective. So there's got to be some blend here of some greenery and some structure that allows this to breathe. And that's what I'm trying to achieve. And I did leave some of the types. I do have water out there. I'm right at that spot, which is a big deal in terms of, I used to go out and have to water some of it and it didn't work. But when I ran water underneath the asphalt. And so there's water there now, which can help me in this process. But that doesn't mean that they'll make it through the winter. So it's a blend of the two, of a wood and some greenery. But I can come back again with some more specifics.
If you get to come back with this, we're gonna have to be very specific on what you're trying to do, not,
Got it.
hypothetical thing that you're telling us that we don't really see in the drawings. Okay. But staying on track of conceptual, does anybody on the board have a problem with the conceptual of a minimalist structure with a canvas top with greenery? I mean, that's what he's presenting.
The only question I have is safety, Matt. There's been several palm trees wiped out on Carteret, and I would hate that to be a person. And that's the only thing, being that close to the street, I worry about, there's no like walls to protect people. I don't know,
Automobiles?
yeah, from automobiles.
Are those bollards structural bollards or are they aesthetic bollards?
I think they're just aesthetic. To my knowledge, they're just aesthetic. To speak to your comment, Rita, I can't predict the future. I have been there 15 years. I've had tabletops there. I've had people standing there before. I've not had anyone come across that sidewalk, but it could happen the day that I do this.
Let's hope, let's hope not, Matt.
I hope not either, but I'm just saying I can't, I can only speak to what I know historically.
Yeah.
That's not happened.
Let's stick to architecture. I know safety is a concern, but let's stick to what we see in front of us, which is.
And I would like to stick, I appreciate Michelle's comments. But I would like to stick, I think there's something to be said for, standing at a space in an urban setting with a critical mass at that corner, at that bar top, and just watching some cars go by and people having conversations. I don't see this as off kilter. So I'd like to, I want to keep on this path. Just wanted to, that may not be what I get, but I want you to know.
What if you kept on that kilter and you just did two, like I'm just saying, like, even if you did the lower element just in front of that other area, where I do think people will gather. I don't think people are gonna gather in that little skinny spot right there.
For the ADA.
So even if you drop the roof and had them be equal,
Yeah, no, I understand though. This is what I
have
want.
more of a Mies van der Rohe kind of like vibe about it, you know, just be more.
I don't, I'm not a hotel owner and I'm not in the food and beverage business. So I don't want to opine on what that business should and shouldn't do to be successful. And I feel similarly about the ADA thing. If it's not in the ADA space, that's a management issue. If he has people that are, causing problems, his management team, that's on their responsibility to deal with. I don't think the ADA thing is for us to opine on. So if it's not in the ADA space, then, it's fine. For a conceptual review, I think it's fine for conceptual. At the next one, I'd like to see if it's live string of pearl or if it's synthetic string of pearl or, what is actually going there. But for conceptual, I think it's fine. And I think some of the notes I have here, I think you addressed it in your presentation. It's a mid-century modern building. It's a mid-century modern looking pergola. It matches the building in style and feel. I would want to know how the bar tops were secured to the bollards. I've sat there and I haven't gotten hit by a truck. So that's good. That's because we did have somebody run into a palm tree in front of one of our buildings. So that's generally my take from that.
I would agree with that. I think that when you look at the structure, you're probably gonna have to upsize it, and that's, deal with this engineering, because 80, I think did you reference 80 miles per hour? Did I hear that?
Oh, I've heard that these systems typically, when they're the size basically that I've talked about and the need for the strength to hold them up for the run. Yeah, that's 60 to 80. That's what I've read.
Yeah, we're in a much higher wind zone than that. I'm not sure how code would apply, but I think we're in the 140, I believe. Let me check them out. But let me just finish. So part of the dealing with the structural component, I think 3x3 seems a bit minimal. I like the basic form, but you probably need, you know, if it was 5 or 6 inches, it probably would feel more appropriately scaled. That would, something I would suggest. And that'll also help to address from the structural component for the rigidity. But I think it's appropriate for this building, and I like the idea of the corner being active. I've sat there
Yeah.
in this patio having coffee. It's a nice, it's kind of a nice little corner.
Yeah, grab a glass of wine at City Loft and,
Okay.
I mean, we recently approved the hot dog patio. And it was very similar to this. I don't see, right?
Is that,
Said hot dog?
someone told, is that the one, is that Los Locals? Tied to Los Locals? Okay.
Beer garden, right?
Yeah, he.
Beer garden.
Yeah, yeah.
A hot dog patio semantics for beer garden.
It is hot dog, but anyway, I mean, we approved something similar to this either last month or the month before. And we all seem to like it. I mean, I think it's aesthetically pleasing.
Were you talking about the one on Scott Street?
Yes.
Has that been, I mean, the last time I saw it hadn't really been,
Ain't
it
finished.
hadn't materialized.
They didn't keep going, something happened. All right, so look, let's stay back on this one. Staff is thinking it's too minimal and not suitable. That's the recommendation from staff and not supportive of this project. You gotta know, I mean, I'm hearing that we are supportive of it. Okay, I think it needs, like, the things we want to give them, if we're giving them conceptual, is come back with the details we're asking for. Let's understand what the divisions will be. I'm like the rest of the board, not too concerned about the ADA stuff, even though it is by code. You can't build it if you don't have it, meet those requirements. So you're gonna have to do that anyways, and you've already showed a drawing that probably will work and meet the requirement. I think you're gonna have to get some engineering done regardless to put a structure up, and that's gonna really show us what the structural integrity is and the sizing of the columns and the attachments. I don't think you're gonna be able to go out there and meet building code and just throw some steel up and put a canvas top on it. I think you're gonna have to have a letter that handles responsibility for the failure if it fails, and that's an engineering letter. So that's something hard to get. Somebody's gotta do it, and we need to see it, you know, for final. But for conceptual, I'm hearing enough support up here for conceptual, so if there's a motion to be made, be a good time to do it.
Rita, it's your turn.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how to word it.
Well, it's, if you can't use staff recommendations because they don't believe
Right.
in it, so you're gonna have to.
Exactly.
There's just some minor things that are gonna bring us back more conceptually.
The first one is actually.
Under
think
tabling.
If we
yeah.
table it, that allows them not to have to reapply, I believe.
Essentially, it's saying that show accurate dimensions for the ADA space, the access style, concern column supports. Must provide detail on the structure of the proposed pergola, the structure is not, you know, all of those could, too, or.
You could just.
Well, the motion could include
Conceptual, but with those two.
1 and 2.
With.
Uh,
first and second
What's
condition.
that?
Okay, I'm just gonna make sure tabling makes them not have to reapply and it makes them not have to pay the fee, I believe, again. Am I right about that?
That's right, I think, you know.
So I think that's
Mr.
the advantage of tabling.
Well, I think you have.
Oh,
two
but we're
options.
further along,
If you say
we're leaning towards
conceptual, you're just,
Approval, okay, well, never
you're
mind.
saying we like the idea and then giving them
Gotcha.
recommendations to move
Yeah, you gotta
forward.
go on your own on
Or
this.
if you table it, then you're saying, we're not sure, we don't have enough information,
I
and we'll
think-
consider this.
Look, I think the staff comments are appropriate, 1 and 2,
Mhm.
just the way we worded under tabling. In this case, we would word it under.
Yes.
I'll make a motion,
Please, Mr.
I
Bowles.
knew he would.
to give conceptual approval, with staff's recommendations, 1 and 2 being considered for the next meeting.
And we have a second. Any other debate or discussion? Hearing none, let's get to a vote.
Aye.
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 Mr. McElhaney, you've got some homework to do. Please bring us back something we can help you with.
I'll try. I'll try.
And I hate to think that the last one just didn't happen, but I understand.
The metrics aren't right now, but that doesn't mean it's gone forever. I promise you that.
You
Good.
have to work economically or they don't work.
Thank you so much.
Need a motion to adjourn? Or do you have other business or?
I was gonna mention a few.
Hang on, let's, Mr. Kurt, do you have a question for us?
I was just gonna give a quick little update
Okay,
for everybody. One, Nicholas Navia is here. He's been a intern for us for a year. He's a former Marine and he
Hoorah.
College of Charleston, and he just graduated in May, so we hired him full-time. And so he's kind of doing a lot of administrative things with the historic preservation.
Great.
committee.
so you
So,
just graduated College of Charleston? You know what a guy named Sutton in your class, preservation class? No, okay. Did you do
He's a planner.
preservation?
He's a planner. So, hey,
Planner.
he's not going over the dark side to preservation.
No, okay, very good.
Good for you.
All right.
Mike, this is Jeremy. Maria knows him.
Does he know him?
What'd you do in the Marine Corps? What'd you do in the Marine Corps? Comtech.
No.
So he's a good addition. I just want to introduce him because he's attending all of our HTRCs and doing synopsis and sending it to all the applicants. And he'll probably be helping with any work we do on the historic district with grant funding, all the administrative things. So I just wanted to
Very
introduce him so
good.
you got to know him. And,
Welcome
about it.
aboard.
Oh, and also, when they finally, I was just going to ask if everybody thinks it would be a good idea to have a more intensive like training discussion session. And, we have some experts here with Metters when the new board members are either reappointed or appointed.
Yes.
If that seems like a good idea, we could do like maybe a lunch like we did last year. That's
Because
maybe.
lunch is provided.
Maybe not Jimmy John's, but maybe actually go to lunch and spend some time doing that, if that seemed like a good idea in the summer when you all had like a Friday available for an afternoon or morning, one of the two.
Okay,
In favor?
training's always good.
Yes.
I don't know when they're gonna appoint somebody. I know they've interviewed everybody and
There was
Last
appointments last night.
Yeah,
Oh, there
last
was-
night they appointed.
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't go. All right. Well, I'll check on that. And then when that's done, we'll send some
Jimmy John's is acceptable.
and do you know what topics, specific topics, windows and new materials seem to be a pretty
Yes.
easy thing, if you want to, because you made the thing on the porch and we can just talk about all those things and maybe get, I think Metters they're the experts really. Maybe they could give a little. That sounds good to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think we ought to have training on,
Or you can talk about it before
well,
we
no, I
set
think
the
we ought to
time.
have training on what does a preservationist title mean? Because obviously, the mayor doesn't think that most of these board members up here are preservationists.
Oh, I'm not going to opine on
Well,
that.
I think,
We can opine on
I-
it too.
So just one,
But maybe we can talk about what you'd like to talk about in a longer training session. I just thought, especially with some of the new materials, it seems like there's a desire to think about them, and I think that's good, but
Yes.
maybe to kind of marinate that with the additional training session to talk about it all is a good idea, right? So maybe not. Just a
very
thought.
good.
No,
no,
I
because
like,
I agree.
Yes, sir.
Before we leave, I think we need to thank Michelle for her.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thanks, same back.
You've been on here how long, Michelle?
I think, I guess just a typical 3-year.
3 year?
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
Eternity.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you for putting up with all this.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we'll close the meeting with adjournment.
Okay.
Thank you.